An old woman asked for a seat, and they pushed her to the floor as if she was worth nothing. People saw it and did nothing. But what nobody knew was who she really was, nor the past she carried, nor what that fall was about to trigger. This isn't just a story of injustice. It's a story that's going to reveal buried secrets, unite separate destinies, and test the heart of everyone involved. Mrs. Mary Peterson got onto that bus like she did every morning, with her grey shawl, her flat shoes, and the leather bag hanging from her arm. She looked like just another one of thousands of grandmothers traversing the city at a slow pace. It was Tuesday, the smell of sweat, traffic, and people in a rush. No one paid attention to anyone else. The bus was packed, as always, crossing along the eastbound Highway 101. Mary entered slowly. No one offered her a seat. She barely managed to hold onto the railing to keep from falling. Her breathing was laboured. She had a slight heart flutter and an old ache in her leg that no longer let her walk like she used to. She walked between the seats. She saw a young woman, well-dressed, sitting in one of the reserved seats. Mary approached, with a politeness that you don't see much of these days. "Excuse me, miss. Would you allow me to sit down for a moment?" The woman didn't answer. She only turned up the volume on her music. Mary tried again, this time touching her arm gently. That's when the woman looked up. She had perfect makeup, fake nails, dark sunglasses, and an expression of pure contempt. "Why don't you stay home? Can't you see this is for people who work?" And without another word, she shoved her with her shoulder, hard. Mary lost her balance. She let go of the rail. Her body hit the floor with a dry thud. No one screamed. No one ran to help her up. Some turned their heads away. Others pretended they didn't see it. No one knew they were witnessing the start of a story that was going to change everything. And if you're here, listening to this, it's because something in you was moved, even just a little. So before we continue, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and leave a like if this story has already touched a part of your heart. And tell me something in the comments. Write the word dignity if you believe no one deserves to be treated like trash just for getting old. Because what comes next isn't just going to hurt, it's going to leave you thinking for days. Lucy Miller was in the back of the bus. She was 27 years old, carrying a backpack full of notebooks and reviewing some lessons for her second-grade students. When she saw the woman fall, it took her a few seconds to react. But her instinct was stronger. She pushed her way through the passengers, many of whom were still looking out the window. She knelt down next to Mary, holding her head carefully. "Are you all right? Does anything hurt?" Mary tried to get up, but couldn't. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I just need to sit down." The woman who pushed her looked back out the window as if nothing had happened, as if Mary was invisible, as if she hadn't heard the impact. Lucy demanded that the driver stop the bus, but he refused. "If I stop here, I'll get a ticket, miss. I can't do it." When they finally managed to reach the intersection with Main Street and Broadway, Mary was gone. She had vanished. Some say she stumbled off at the next stop. Others say someone helped her and she left on another transport. But no one had any certainty. Only one thing was left behind. A leather bag, old, worn, abandoned under the seat where Mary had tried to sit. Lucy picked it up. Inside was an embroidered handkerchief, a couple of mint candies, a rosary, and a notebook. A notebook with names and dates, handwritten, in fine penmanship. And an old photograph, partially burned, where you could make out two children and the incomplete face of a woman. Lucy felt a chill. She didn't know that in her hands was the thread of a story that would drag her deep into the past, to a forgotten truth, to a woman who wasn't who everyone thought she was. and to a family that had lived with a guarded secret for decades. This is the story of Mrs. Mary, and we're just getting started. Lucy couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the face of the woman falling to the floor again, her eyes closed, the muffled groan, the dry thud on the bus floor. And what weighed on her the most wasn't the fall, but what came after. The silence. No one got up. No one raised their voice. No one did anything. Since she was a child, Lucy had learned that you don't turn your back on someone else's pain. Her grandmother always said that you don't have to have money to be a good person. And yet, on that bus full of adults, it was she, the youngest, who had to kneel down, who helped the woman up, who asked for help. And the woman, where did she go? That was what bothered her the most. After helping her to stand, Lucy saw her take a difficult breath. The woman didn't want to wait for the ambulance. She barely murmured that she didn't want to cause trouble and got off at the next stop, walking alone on the sidewalk as if nothing had happened. But she was staggering. She seemed confused. She had trouble keeping her pace. Lucy tried to follow her, but between the cars, the traffic, and the chaos, she lost sight of her when she turned the corner. She walked several blocks looking for her. She asked a hot dog vendor, a parking attendant, a police officer. No one had seen her. No one knew what she was talking about. She returned home with an uncomfortable feeling as if something was missing in her chest. The next morning, she went straight to the nearest hospital, a small one in the South End district, to ask if they had admitted any elderly woman with a possible fall and physical discomfort. Nothing. She went to another further south, in the Queens neighborhood. Not there, either. She even called 2 private clinics. Not a single match. With every rejection, her anxiety grew. Lucy didn't understand how it was possible for a person to disappear like that, in the middle of New York City, in broad daylight, among thousands of eyes that saw nothing. Returning home that afternoon, she decided to write down what she remembered. She sat at the kitchen table, took out her school planning notebook, and began to make notes. Woman between 70 and 80 years old. White hair pulled back. Grey or brown dress. Dark shawl. Old brown leather bag. Very quiet, polite voice. Got off at the corner of Highway 101 and Main Street. Did not reappear. As she was writing, something struck her memory. The bag. When she helped the woman get up, she noticed she had a bag hanging from her shoulder. But when she got off the bus, was she carrying it? Did she forget it? Did she drop it? That doubt was like a spark, because if the bag had been left on the bus, maybe it was still there. Lucy left the house immediately. She walked quickly to the Route 44 bus depot in the Bay Ridge area. There, among the mechanics, the drivers, and the smell of diesel, she asked for the bus that had made the Highway 101 downtown route the previous morning. "The one at 9:15, said one of the drivers, wiping his hands with a dirty rag. "Yes, Don Julian drove that one." They looked for him. The man was drinking coffee, standing next to a dismounted tire. He was middle-aged, with a weathered face and a tired but attentive look. Lucy explained everything to him, from the woman's fall to her disappearance. Julian nodded his head. He said yes. He remembered that a woman had fallen, that a girl helped her, but he didn't think it was that serious. "So many people get on and off. You can't know how everything ends up," he said, with a hint of guilt. Lucy asked him if he had found a bag. "Wait a minute," he replied, and walked toward the lost and found. 3 minutes passed that seemed like an eternity, until he returned with something in his hand, an old leather bag, worn, with half-broken straps. "Is this it?" Lucy recognized it immediately. It was the same one. She gripped it tightly. The leather smelled of time, of stored dust, of the past. She took it home without opening it. Something inside her told her it wasn't just a forgotten bag. Arriving at her room, she placed it on the bed. She took a deep breath. She opened it carefully, as if something fragile was inside. The first thing she saw was a white handkerchief, hand-embroidered with the initials CDP. Then a worn wooden rosary, and at the bottom, a hardback notebook, wrapped in an antique cloth. She took it out delicately. It smelled of storage, of memories. She opened it, and there, on the first page, in fine handwriting, almost from another time, she read, "Names I cannot forget," and below, a list. Lucy swallowed and turned the page. On the next sheet, taped with yellow tape, was a photograph. A black and white image, slightly burned in one corner. A young woman was visible. It could be Mary, and two children no more than 5 years old. One of them was holding a flower, the other a wooden toy. Lucy felt something tighten in her stomach. She still didn't know what those names meant, nor why someone would carry such an old, well-preserved photo inside a bag that clearly had no value to anyone else. But deep inside, something told her she was about to discover something much bigger than a fall on a bus, and much more painful, because that list wasn't just of names. It was a list of absences, of open wounds, of separated lives, and everything was about to start coming to light. Lucy closed the notebook and held it between her hands as if she were carrying something sacred. The texture of the cover was worn, but still firm. There were no frills, no gold lettering, no decorations. It was an ordinary notebook, the kind sold at any stationery store, but what it contained inside had the weight of a lifetime. She sat on the edge of her bed. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, coloring the sky an orange-grey. Inside the house, everything seemed motionless, in silence, as if it too was waiting for her to turn the page. The list continued, names written in small script, ordered by date. Some crossed out, others underlined. Next to each one, there was a number, possibly an age, and in certain cases, a word: lost, adopted, not located, deceased. Lucy didn't fully understand what she was looking at. Were they relatives? People Mary had known? Or perhaps children? On a loose sheet inside the notebook, she found something else. It was a kind of hand-drawn map, with crooked lines, as if someone had drawn it from memory. There were words written: Yellow House, or Beatrice, Room 2, Laurel Alley. Lucy observed it carefully. The name of a nun, a reference to a house, and an incomplete address. Everything seemed written in a rush, as if it were a memory that had to be captured before it disappeared. She set the notebook aside for a moment and looked at the bag again. Beneath the rosary, she found a small, older notebook, almost illegible. The first pages were blank, but on the back there was a note, written in different handwriting. If something happens to me, let them know I didn't forget. I didn't abandon them. They took them from me. And even if the world closes the door on me, I won't stop looking for them. Lucy felt a chill. That sentence wasn't from someone confused. It was from someone broken inside, who lived with guilt and hope at the same time. It was from a mother. With a heavy heart, she returned to the notebook and went back to the first page. She reread every name calmly. 2 of them were written in a firmer hand, as if they had been forcefully marked, Gabriel and Thomas, both with the same date next to them, May 4, 1971. Then, in a corner, barely visible, a phrase that seemed to be written with a different pen. 12th Street, East LA, Mrs. Rebecca's boarding house. Lucy jumped up. East LA, she murmured to herself. That neighborhood was less than 40 minutes away by subway. She knew the area well because of her mother, who had worked for years at a nearby bakery. What struck her the most was that mixture of loose clues, incomplete memories, and names that seemed to scream from the paper. It was too late to go out, but something inside her wouldn't let her wait until the next day. She put the notebook, the map, and the small book in a backpack, and without telling anyone, she headed for the metro station at Union Square. The neighborhood was dense, with tight alleys, unplastered brick houses, cables hanging between poles, and stray dogs roaming among the trash cans. She asked in a store for the street mentioned. The owner, an older man with thick eyebrows, told her that the street existed, but that Laurel Alley hadn't been called that for years. However, he gave her an approximate address. Lucy reached a rusty green gate with the number 156 painted by hand. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. A minute later, an older woman, thin, with a blue shawl and a cane, opened the door. "Are you Mrs. Rebecca?" Lucy asked, her heart racing. "Who's asking?" the woman replied, suspicious. "You don't know me. I'm Lucy Miller. I wanted to ask you about a woman. Maybe she lived here recently. Her name is Mary. Mary," she took out the notebook. "Mary D.P. I'm not sure of the full last name." The woman was silent. She looked at the notebook. Then she looked Lucy in the eyes. "The old woman from the bus." Lucy froze. "How do you know?" "Because a few days ago a young woman came here. She showed me a picture. She asked about Mrs. Mary. And then Mary herself came here one night. She asked me to keep an envelope. She didn't tell me anything else. She just cried. And then she left, trembling." Lucy didn't know what to say. Her head filled with more questions. Who was the woman who looked for her? What was in that envelope? "Do you still have it?" Mrs. Rebecca nodded. She went in with difficulty and returned with a brown envelope, sealed with an old ribbon. She said that if anyone came, she should only hand it over if they asked about Gabriel and Thomas. Lucy felt the air leave her body. "Gabriel and Thomas," she repeated. "They are the names that appear in the notebook." "Then it's yours." Lucy held the envelope with both hands. It was light, but its contents weighed more than any brick. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photo, a color image worn by the years, a young woman, 2 children hugging her, and on the back, an inscription written in black ink. "The last day at home, before they took them away from me." Lucy closed her eyes. That envelope not only confirmed that Mary wasn't just any elderly woman. She was a woman with a broken past, a story violently torn away. And now someone else was also looking for her, but not with the same intentions. Lucy stood for a long time in front of the closed door of the boarding house, with the envelope in her hands and her mind spinning like a whirlpool. The street was almost empty. Only a few children ran by, shouting with backpacks on their backs and the smell of freshly baked bread coming from a nearby kitchen. She pressed the notebook against her chest and began to walk back to the subway, with a certainty she couldn't leave it like that. That woman, Mary, was not just an elderly woman beaten down by the contempt of a stranger. There was something much deeper behind it. When she got home, the first thing she did was sit in front of her old computer, the one that barely turned on, with the internal fan that hummed like a broken blender. She opened a civil records search page and typed the name that appeared in the small book, Mary D. P. She tried different combinations, Mary Delapena, Mary Duarte Peters, Mary Delgado Parsons. Nothing. She changed sites. She searched in databases for birth, death, marriage certificates. Nothing. Not in New York City, nor in New Jersey State, not even in old records. Then she thought that maybe they weren't full names. Maybe those initials meant something else. She tried searching only for Mary and one of the dates written next to the names in the notebook. The most prominent, May 4, 1971. It was clear that this day held significant weight. It appeared underlined twice next to both Gabriel and Thomas. She entered a digital archive of old newspapers and looked for news related to that day. There was a note about a mass eviction in East LA, in a neighborhood then called the Triumph. It didn't mention names, only that several families had been evicted from an occupied property. Lucy rubbed her eyes. She went back to the notebook. On one of the last pages, written in tight, nervous handwriting, there was an underlined sentence. They erased my name. They erased me from the papers, but not from my memory. That explained everything. Mary no longer existed in any record because she was disappeared from the system. Perhaps due to negligence, corruption, or simply poverty. She didn't have an official name. She didn't have a birth certificate. She had no history in the archives. She only had her notebook. And her pain. Lucy got up from the chair with determination. She took her old cell phone and called a friend, Alex, who worked as an assistant at a public clinic. She wanted to know if there was a way to verify if a woman of that profile had been treated in recent days without needing a full name. "Do you remember the case you told me about?" Alex said when she heard Lucy's voice. "The woman who was pushed on the bus. Well, a woman like that did come here 3 days ago. She came into the emergency room for a hip injury, but she gave a different name, one that no one could confirm later." "What name?" "Maria Rivers." "But she didn't have ID. She just said that and signed with a shaky hand. After one night in the hospital, she left. No one accompanied her. No one picked her up. And in her file, they put down that she was homeless." Lucy felt a knot in her stomach. "And do you still have her file?" "Yes, but it's only 1 page. An entry without follow-up. No one claimed anything. Can I come see it tomorrow? If you come early, before 8 o'clock, I'll show you. But don't tell anyone I let you see it. They're very strict about that here." Lucy hung up. She knew she had to get up early, but she couldn't sleep. She stayed staring at the notebook on the table as if waiting for it to speak to her itself. She read a couple more pages. The annotations became more disorganized as the years went by. There were crossed-out sentences, single words in the middle of blank pages. Lie. They never looked for me. I don't know if they are still alive. I did wait for them. There were watermarks on some pages, perhaps tears, perhaps humidity from some place where she slept outdoors. Near 1 o'clock in the morning, she finally fell asleep with her head resting on the table. And the next day, as soon as the sun came up, she put on a sweatshirt, put the notebook and the envelope in her backpack, and headed for the clinic. Alex was waiting for her at the staff entrance. It was an old building, one that smelled of bleach, cheap medicine, and despair. She signaled for her to enter through a side door. They walked down a narrow hallway to an office with metal filing cabinets. "Here it is," her friend said, taking out a thin folder. Lucy opened it. Name, Maria Rivers. Estimated age, between 70 and 80 years. Reason for admission, fall and hematoma on the left hip. Vital signs, stable. Observation, patient confused, refuses to answer questions about relatives or address. Voluntary discharge signed out on May 14, 6 o'clock 40 minutes in the morning. "That was 2 days ago," Lucy murmured. "And after that? Did no one else hear from her?" Alex shook her head. I asked around. No one saw her leave. We thought maybe she left on foot or took a bus, but no one can confirm it. She disappeared again. Lucy remained silent. She no longer had doubts. Mrs. Mary had been erased from everywhere, from the archives, from the hospitals, from the streets. Only her story remained, and someone had to tell it. But what Lucy still didn't know was that there was someone else who did know that false name, and it wasn't by chance. The clinic clock marked 7:30 when Lucy went outside. The New York City sky was covered by low, dirty clouds, as if it too carried the weight of an untold story. She walked with the notebook safely tucked under her jacket, and the envelope still closed, fearing that time or rain would erase what little remained of Mrs. Mary. As she crossed the street, she couldn't shake an idea from her head. If that woman had used a false name at the hospital and had disappeared again, she must have had a very clear reason for doing so. No one who isn't running invents their name twice. No one who hasn't been hurt multiple times avoids being found with such firmness. Back home, she checked the last annotations in the notebook again. It was then that she noticed a page almost hidden between thicker ones. On it, handwritten in pale blue ink, was an incomplete address. Mrs. Rebecca's boarding house, St. Augustine Alley and East LA. The date accompanying the note was just 2 weeks old. Lucy knew that kind of data isn't written without reason. If Mary had been there, perhaps someone in that place would know something more, some detail about where she went afterward or why she was so scared. Without wasting time, she changed her clothes, tied her hair back, and took the subway to the New Lots Avenue station. From there, she walked through alleys, asking neighbors until a woman selling tamales pointed her to a rusty gate with a small hanging plaque that read, R. Parsons Boarding House. She rang the bell with some fear. Several seconds passed before a small window in the door opened, and an older woman, with a thin face and deep eyes, observed her from within. "What are you looking for?" "Good afternoon. My name is Lucy. I'm looking for information about a woman who may have lived here recently. Mary, an elderly woman, thin, with white hair and a dark shawl." The woman didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be sizing her up with her eyes, as if trying to figure out if she was lying or telling the truth just by looking at her. "Many people have lived here," she finally said. "Does she have a last name?" Lucy took out the notebook and showed her the annotation. "This is all I have." The woman looked at the notebook, then lowered her gaze and sighed. The woman who always wrote in the early mornings? The one who talked to herself? Yes, she was here. Lucy felt an electric shock run down her spine. "Do you know how long she lived here?" "Almost 3 months. She rented a small room on the second floor. She paid on time, quiet, very clean. She didn't bother anyone. But recently, one night, she arrived very nervous. She packed everything in black bags and left without saying where. She only left a note on the mattress. What did it say? "Thank you for the roof. Sorry for leaving like this. I can't stay where they've already found me." Lucy was silent. "Who found her?" she asked in a low voice. "I don't know. But days before, a very haughty woman came, one of those who smell of expensive perfume, asking for a woman named Maria Rivers. She said she was a relative who had mental problems and was coming for her. I didn't believe a word of it." "And did Mary find out?" "I don't know if it was a coincidence, but 2 days later she was gone, and she left no trace. Only the note." Lucy swallowed. "Can I see her room?" The woman hesitated, but finally agreed. They went up together a narrow staircase with worn concrete steps. The room was empty, except for a metal cot and an old plastic table. Next to the window, there were marks of adhesive tape on the wall. as if photos, papers, and memories had been stuck there. Lucy approached. On the window frame, written in pencil, almost invisible, was a name: Thomas. There was nothing more, but it was enough. Going downstairs, the owner of the boarding house told her something she didn't expect. She asked me for only one thing before she left. She told me that if someone good, someone with a truly good heart, looked for her, I should give them this. She took a small blue cloth bag, tied with a ribbon, from a drawer. Lucy took it carefully and opened it. Inside was a small, rusty key and a folded piece of paper. The paper said, "What I have left is hidden. No one touched it for years. If you made it this far, it's because there is still someone willing to understand." Lucy left there with the key clenched in her palm. The wind hit her face as she walked down the street, with the certainty that she was getting closer to something big. But she wasn't alone. A man watched her from a corner, sitting on a motorcycle. He had been following her for days, and now he also knew about the boarding house and about the key. The small Takuba hospital was always full. It was an old 3-story building with cracked ceilings and chipped metal chairs in the waiting room. Outside, the line for the emergency room extended to the sidewalk, among people carrying wrinkled prescriptions, inconclusive studies, and the hope that they would be seen that day. That morning, around 6:20, an elderly woman crossed the main door alone. She walked with difficulty, a slight limp in her left leg and her shawl incorrectly placed. Her face was pale, her lips dry, and her gaze distant. She didn't have ID, nor a wallet, nor a cell phone, only the clothes she was wearing and an expression of weariness accumulated over years. When the security guard asked for her name, she hesitated for a second. Then, lowering her voice, she replied, "Maria Rivers." She said it without looking up, as if she didn't want to fully claim the name. The man wrote down the information and gave her a ticket. An hour later, she was called by a young doctor who immediately noticed that the woman had signs of a hip injury and dehydration. She asked her what had happened. "I tripped on the sidewalk," she replied. "Do you live alone?" "Yes." "Do you have any family we can contact?" "No, I'm fine alone." The doctor tried to insist, but the woman closed her eyes and answered no more questions. She was admitted for observation. Her hip was not broken, but the hematoma was deep and her blood pressure was dropping at times. During that night, she didn't speak to anyone. She didn't ask for food. She didn't turn on the television in the room. She just stared at the ceiling, as if she was waiting for something, or someone. The next morning, before the first shift change, she got up without making a sound. She dressed slowly, folded the blankets, and left the bed made. On the nightstand, she placed a $100 bill and a sheet torn from a prescription pad. "Thank you for the care. I have to go. I'm not sick in the body, only in the past." And she left. No one noticed her leaving. No one stopped her in the hallways. In the log, it was only recorded that she left with a voluntary discharge. No one accompanied her. No one claimed her. Some nurses later commented that she seemed lost. Others said no, that that woman knew exactly where she was going, that she had the eyes of someone who has walked many times without direction, but not without reason. 2 blocks after the hospital, she entered a bakery and asked for a sweet roll. She didn't have coins, so she handed over the $100 bill. The young man at the counter, surprised by her slow and antique accent, tried to strike up a conversation, but she only said, "Do you know if there is a room for rent around here? A small one." He thought for a moment and remembered that his aunt lived alone in a boarding house at the end of Watmock Street. He wrote the address on a napkin and gave it to her. She put it in the pocket of her shawl, took her bread, and left without saying more. What that young man didn't know, what no one knew at that moment, was that that elderly woman had already lived in that same neighborhood, that this path was not new to her, that every street, every corner, every utility pole had a memory imprinted that only she could see. Meanwhile, in East LA, Lucy reviewed the key that Mrs. Rebecca had given her over and over again. It was small, of opaque brass, with the initials CDP artisanally engraved. She tried to find some reference in the notebook, but she didn't find any direct mention of a storage unit, house, or safe. Only some loose phrases. If something happens to me, let them open where fear slept. I hid what I couldn't scream there. Lucy sat down to review everything from the beginning. The notes, the names, the addresses, the details. Something was escaping her. The key was in some point she had already seen, but hadn't known how to read. She returned to the boarding house. She knocked hard on the door. Mrs. Rebecca opened it, surprised to see her so soon. "Did Mary happen to mention any place where she kept things from the past?" Lucy asked abruptly. "Something that wasn't here." The woman thought for a second. Once, when she arrived, she asked if the house still had the old storage room, the one behind the patio. I told her no, that we covered it up years ago, but she insisted. She said that what you bury, sooner or later finds a way to come out. It seemed strange to me. "Can I see it?" They both walked toward the back patio. At the back, under some rusty sheets and old boxes, there was a cracked concrete cover. Mrs. Rebecca knelt down, pushed one of the boxes aside, and exposed a small lock. Lucy took the key from her backpack. Her hands were shaking. She inserted it. She turned it once. The click was soft, and the cover gave way. A smell of dust, wood, and confinement immediately emerged. The light from the patio barely reached the interior. It wasn't large, just a cavity like an underground pantry. Inside was a cardboard box, lined with navy blue cloth. Lucy took it out carefully and placed it on a table in the patio and opened it. The first thing she saw was a notebook like the previous one, but much older. On the first page, a full name written in red marker, Mary Della Penna. Now she had her full name. Now everything was going to start for real. But at the bottom of the box, there was something else, a cut-out piece of newspaper, with a photo, and a face that Lucy had seen before. Not in the notebook, not at the boarding house, but on the bus, the day of the push, the face of the woman who knocked Mary to the ground. Patricia. And below the photo, a brief note. Daughter of Gabriel D.P., real estate mogul. Lucy froze. Without wanting to, she had just found the first real clue to the past, and a connection that no one had imagined. The name Gabriel D.P., printed under the newspaper photograph, floated in Lucy's mind like a bell that had just rung loudly. The photo showed Patricia at a business event, next to an elegant man with grey hair, a forced smile, and a harsh gaze. He was her father, the same one who, according to the clipping, had built a real estate empire in the south of the city. Lucy looked at the old notebook again. The name Gabriel was there from the beginning, written on Mary's list, with the date May 4, 1971 next to it. That day must have a special meaning, a kind of line drawn between the past and everything that came after. She sat on the floor of the small room where she had found the box, and with her heart pounding, she opened the notebook to the first page. The handwriting was younger than in the previous notebook. The sentences were well traced, firm, as if the person who wrote them still had strength and hope in their body. Today was the most difficult day of my life. I left with the children without knowing where. No one helped me. No one asked. No one stopped that man when he threw us out of the house with our suitcases on the sidewalk and our dignity in shreds. I don't know what we'll do tomorrow, but for today, we are still breathing. Gabriel asked me if we are going to sleep in a bed tonight. I didn't know what to tell him. The date at the bottom of that annotation coincided exactly with the newspaper clipping. That very same May 4th, 48 years ago. Lucy swallowed and continued reading. Thomas won't stop crying. He has a fever, but I don't have money for medicine. This city is too big for a single woman with 2 children. I don't want to go back to the town. There's nothing there. They also turned their backs on me there when I came back pregnant. They told me that a woman who doesn't know how to keep her husband won't know how to take care of children either. They told me that looking me in the eye, without disgust, only with contempt. My mother lowered her head. My father didn't even come out of the kitchen. The words were knives. They were from someone who had nowhere else to go and still refused to give up. Lucy turned the pages slowly, like someone opening a wound but needing to see what's inside. Today I met a lady named Henrietta. She offered me to sweep the floor of a diner for a few dollars. I accepted. We slept on the rooftop of a building under construction. We covered ourselves with the shawl. Gabriel told me he heard someone crying in the early morning. I told him it was me, but only for a little while. He pretended to be asleep, but he squeezed my hand harder. I can't do this anymore. Thomas has a cough, and his throat won't stop burning. I asked for help at a relief centre, but they told me they can't take us without papers. I don't have a birth certificate. I don't have a social security card. I have nothing. Only fear. They told me maybe the convent on Guadalupe Street can take them for a while. I don't know. It breaks my heart to think about leaving them there. But I have no option. That sentence marked the end of an era. In the following pages there was no more talk of the children, only of the search, of the cold, of the years that began to pass without anyone answering. Today I returned to the convent. They told me the children are no longer there, that they were handed over to a family. I asked what family. They told me they couldn't give me information. I screamed. They made me leave. I knelt on the sidewalk. No one stopped. I stood up with the notebook in my hands and swore I would find them, even if I had to live 100 years. Lucy felt a lump in her throat. She went back to the box, looking for more clues. There were a few more objects. A handkerchief with embroidered initials, GT, an empty perfume bottle, with the glass broken on one side, and one more envelope, wrinkled, with another cut-out piece of newspaper. This time older, it showed a brief note. Eviction in East LA property leaves families homeless. Government promises support. There were no names, only a blurry image of a woman carrying 2 children. Her face was not clear, but the hands, the shape of the body, Lucy knew it was her. She reread the annotation that Mary had left next to the key. If you made it this far, it's because there is still someone willing to understand. Lucy understood. She felt it. But she also knew that understanding Mary's pain wasn't enough. She had to do something with it. Give it an ending. Justice. Reparation, even if it was delayed. She stood up, closed the box again, and put it in her backpack. But just before leaving the room, her cell phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. Hello? The voice on the other end was deep, paused. Are you the girl who's looking for Mrs. Mary? Lucy was silent. Who is this? Let's say someone who knows more than he seems to. If you really want to help her, you need to hear what I saw, what I kept quiet about for years. Where can we meet? The man hesitated. At St. Peter's Parish, this afternoon. Don't come with anyone. And don't say my name over the phone." Lucy hung up without knowing exactly what had just happened. But she knew instantly. That man, the one who said he knew more, was part of Mary's story. And by the way he spoke, it was possible that he hadn't helped her when he should have. Or worse, that he had been one of those who betrayed her. St. Peter's Parish, in the Claremont neighbourhood, was an old construction, one of those that smells of incense and old wood. At that hour of the afternoon, there was no mass or activities. Only a few people prayed in silence, sitting on the ends of the pews. The wind entered through the open stained glass windows, gently moving the candles on the side altar. Lucy arrived on time, with her backpack slung over her shoulder and an uneasy heart. She sat in one of the central pews and waited. She didn't know who she should look for. She only had that voice in her head, paused, firm, with a strange weight that you don't hear in just anyone. A few minutes later, an older man sat a couple of seats away. He was dressed simply, with a beige jacket and a dark beret. He had large, thick hands, like someone who worked with brick or wood for many years. He didn't turn to look at her, but he spoke in a low voice. "You shouldn't be walking around alone with things like that. Sometimes the past doesn't want to be brought out." Lucy turned towards him. She didn't know him, or so she thought. "Are you the one who called me?" "Yes, but don't say my name. No one should know we're talking." Lucy pressed her lips together. Her instinct told her she could trust him, but at the same time, everything in her remained alert. "You said you knew things about Mary." The man nodded. "I knew her, more than 40 years ago, when she came to work in a house in the Del Valle neighbourhood. Mrs. Agnes hired her, the mother of Don Julian, the owner of the land. Mary cleaned, looked after the children, cooked, and even though she was quiet, she always treated everyone well." What year was that? 71. Right after that mass eviction that was in the newspaper. She never talked about her past. But once I happened to see her crying in the kitchen. I asked her if she was okay, and she only said that she had left her children for a while and didn't know if she would see them again. Lucy felt a knot in her stomach. What happened next? One day, without warning, Mrs. Agnes fired her. She said someone had broken into the house at night and things were missing. Mary swore it wasn't her, but no one listened. She left crying. No one defended her. The man hesitated. "I should have spoken up, but I didn't. I saw how they mistreated her, how they paid her less than promised, how they made her work late into the night. And I didn't say anything, because I also needed that job." Lucy lowered her gaze. "Do you know anything about her children? Do you know what happened to them?" "Not directly, but many years later I found out something that chilled my blood. The boss, Don Julian, had a brother who went to live abroad. His name was Gabriel. He had a daughter, Patricia, and once at a dinner, I overheard them saying that the girl wasn't completely blood-related, that she had been adopted, but legally recognized as Gabriel's daughter. I never knew if it was gossip, but seeing that photo you have—" The man looked at her finally, seriously. "I have no doubt." Lucy felt the world closing in on her. Everything fit, but at the same time, it seemed impossible. Patricia, the woman who had pushed Mary on the bus, could she be Mary's granddaughter? "Where is Mary now?" he asked, after a long silence. Lucy thought about it for a moment. "I don't know. I saw her fall that day. Then she disappeared. I only found her story, her clues, but she is still lost." The man nodded, and before leaving, he left something on the pew, a folded photo. Lucy opened it. It was an old black and white image. Mary, much younger, smiling with two children in her arms, one with curly hair and the other with a serious gaze. On the back, written in pencil, Gabriel and Thomas, last day together, 1971. Lucy was left alone on the pew, looking at the image. The candle on the altar flickered as if it were about to go out, but it resisted. She returned home with that image imprinted in her mind. Every step was heavier. Every piece she discovered brought her closer to that woman's pain, but also to her own. Because it was no longer just about helping, it was about seeking justice. That night, she opened Mary's old notebook one last time. She reread the entry written the day she left them at the convent. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible. Today I handed over my children. I promised to return. They told me it was for their own good. They told me it was temporary. But something inside me broke when I heard the door close behind them. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself, but I swear I will look for them every day, until the last one. Lucy closed her eyes. The weight of the unkept promise was like an endless echo. But there was still one possibility left. One more clue. In one of the margins of the notebook, almost imperceptible, was an address written in pencil, St. Teresa's Convent, Cuernavaca, Morelos. And a single word. File. Lucy knew that the truth might be there, and that she shouldn't go alone. Because if what she suspected was true, someone else would also be looking for that same file, not to find the truth, but to bury it. Cuernavaca dawned warm, as if the sun didn't quite dare to come out. The streets, still damp from the pre-dawn rain, gave off an aroma of wet earth, and the silence of the historic center contrasted with the storm that Lucy carried inside. She had travelled from New York City on the first bus, with Mary's notebook in her backpack, the envelope with the folded photo, and the address written in pencil she had discovered the night before, St. Teresa's Convent, file. The journey was long. She had been reviewing the names, the dates, the clues, everything she had learned for more than an hour. Mary's story wasn't just a tale of abandonment. It was a puzzle made of omissions, imposed silences, and fragmented memories. And that day, Lucy was going in search of the most important piece, the file that recorded the day Mary lost her children. She asked about the convent to a woman selling flowers in front of the cathedral. She pointed her to a cobblestone alley, almost hidden among trees, that ended in a tall, rusty iron gate. Behind the gate, a modest building with white walls and windows with thick cloth curtains. At the entrance, an old bell hung from the frame. Lucy pulled the rope. After a few seconds, a short nun, elderly and with a kind face, peered out through a small side door. "Yes, my child?" "Good morning, I'm Lucy. I'm looking for information about a woman who brought her children here many years ago. Her name was Mary Della Pena." The nun lowered her gaze as soon as she heard the name. She didn't say anything for a long moment. "That story, it is not new to us." Lucy frowned. "Then you did know her?" The woman nodded slowly. "I was a novice when she came. I remember her face. She came with two children. One was carrying a teddy bear in his arm. The other held her skirt so tightly it was hard to walk. She cried without crying. You could tell she didn't want to leave them, but she had no other option." "Were the children given up for adoption?" "Yes, but not immediately. They were here for just over a year. Mary came every week. She brought bread, clothes, toys. She spoke to them from the other side of the fence because she was not allowed direct contact. Even so, the children knew she was their mother. They called her Mama Carmencita." Lucy squeezed the notebook in her arms. What happened next? "One afternoon she stopped coming. Then we heard that she had become ill. No one else visited them. And one day, A foreign couple came with papers from the Child Services Agency and took them away. We couldn't do anything. The orders came from above. Do you keep any records? A sheet? A photo? Anything? The nun hesitated. The old files were moved to the diocesan archive. But there is something else. Something that was left here by mistake. Come, follow me. She led her down a narrow hallway to a room that smelled of locked-up wood. She opened an old wardrobe full of dusty folders. She took out a flat box made of hardened cardboard. Inside, a pile of photographs, all in black and white, some torn, others barely visible. Sometimes we took photos of the children to have a record of their admission. Not all of them are preserved, but this was the only one someone tried to destroy. She took out a folded image with a burned corner and ragged edges. Lucy took it carefully. In it, Mary appeared sitting on a bench, with Gabriel on her right and Thomas on her left. The expression on her face was hard to read. She seemed at the same time resigned and clinging to them with all her soul. But someone had tried to erase that image. Mary's face was scratched, and on it there were black ink marks. Who did this? We never knew, but someone returned for the photo some time later. An elegant woman in a dark dress and a foreign accent. She said it was part of a family investigation. We were not convinced, and we hid the image. Lucy held it up to the light. The damage was evident, but the children's faces were still recognizable. Furthermore, the child on the left was the same as the press photograph where Gabriel D.P., Patricia's father, appeared. There was no doubt. Mary's children were adopted, and at least one of them became a business tycoon, one who never looked back. Can I take it? You shouldn't, the nun said. But if this story is going to heal something, then yes, my child. Take it. Lucy thanked her in silence. She left the convent feeling her heart beating against her chest as if it were about to burst. That image was the proof, the direct connection. Mary had not invented anything. She was not confused. She was not exaggerating. She had lost her children due to a cruel mix of poverty, bureaucracy, and abandonment. And now her granddaughter, the woman who pushed her on the bus, was part of a family that had perhaps hidden all that past. As she walked down the cobblestone street, she felt someone watching her. She turned around discreetly. On the opposite corner, a tall man, wearing a cap and dark glasses, pretended to read the menu of a diner. It wasn't the first time she had seen him. She quickened her pace. She got into the first taxi she found and asked to be taken to the terminal. During the ride, she didn't stop looking in the rearview mirror. That image was no longer just a memory. It was a threat to someone, and Lucy knew that if she kept going, there would be no turning back. Lucy arrived at the Cuernavaca bus terminal with an accelerated pulse and a tense gaze. She didn't sit down. She didn't eat. She wasn't distracted by anything. She only waited for the next bus back to New York City, while watching every face that entered or left the waiting room out of the corner of her eye. The man with the cap was no longer there, but his presence continued to hover like a shadow. She knew what that meant, what she carried in her backpack. Those photos, that notebook, and that story were dangerous. Not because of what they showed, but because of what they revealed. Once on the bus, she leaned against the window and closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep. She thought again and again about what the sister at the convent had told her. About those days when Mary visited her children, about that lost year, and the moment she simply stopped showing up. Was it due to illness? Due to threats? Or because they snatched away even that from her? The key was in that dark period. Upon arriving in the city, she took a shared van directly to the Seabreeze neighborhood where her uncle lived, who had worked for years in the Child Services Agency archives. He was old, almost blind, but his memory was still intact. If anyone knew how to track a file that no longer existed, it was him. Don Matt received her with the usual surprise, but without asking too many questions. He listened carefully in silence, while Lucy explained what she was looking for: a record of adoption, transfer of custody, or at least a clue about where Gabriel and Thomas had been sent after leaving the convent. "Not many files survived the changes in government, my child," he said, stirring his coffee with a spoon that clinked against the cup. "But there was one that was kept separate for a long time: Our Lady of Sorrows Orphanage in the Moctezuma neighborhood. They took in children of all kinds there. Some came with papers, others did not." "Is it still operating?" "No. They closed it years ago. There was a fire. It was said to be an electrical failure, but there are those who are sure it was arson. Many records were lost." Lucy felt an emptiness in her chest. "Where exactly is it?" 17th Street, between the abandoned bakery and a wall with graffiti. It doesn't have a sign, only a rusty blue gate. Lucy went that same afternoon. The Moctezuma neighborhood was a labyrinth of straight streets, old houses, and half-closed businesses. Upon arriving at the designated place, she recognized it instantly: the blue gate, the cracked walls, the broken windows. No one seemed to live there, but there was a thick air, as if time had stopped right before a tragedy. She jumped the side fence with effort and walked through a neglected patio covered in weeds. The internal doors were all open. There were rusty beds, burned desks, and remnants of papers scattered on the floor. In one of the rooms, she found a charred wardrobe. Among the carbonized remains, a folder was almost intact, protected by thick plastic. She took it with trembling hands and opened it. Inside, there were pages stuck together, but on one of them she could still read: "Admission, Gabriel and Thomas D.P. Estimated age, 6 and 4 years. Date, July 17, 1972. Origin, St. Teresa's Convent, Cuernavaca. Observations, united siblings, biological mother, no contact for 3 months, emotional state, unstable, destination, International Adoption Center, transfer requested by private intermediary." Lucy felt her heart stop. They weren't just 2 children handed over. They had been separated from the country, handed over to an external party. Who was that private intermediary, and why? By what right? She continued searching among the papers and found one more sheet. It was wrinkled, folded in 3, as if someone had wanted to hide it. Letter from the biological mother. "I, Mary Della Pena, did not sign any authorization for my children to leave the country. They told me it was temporary, that I could see them once a month. They never told me they would take them away. I want to appeal this decision. I want to get them back." There was no signature, only a fingerprint at the end, that of someone desperate. Lucy put the documents in her backpack, with tears in her eyes. That was the proof of everything. Mary never abandoned them. She fought. She wrote. She pleaded. But no one listened to her. And now, after so many years, that truth was beginning to emerge. But she wasn't alone. As she left through the back patio, a silhouette appeared in the shadows. It was the same man who had followed her in Cuernavaca, this time without glasses, without a cap. His face was hard, his hands hidden in his pockets. "You have enough now," he said in a dry voice. "Leave this for your own good." Lucy looked him straight in the eyes. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He just advanced a step. "This is no longer about you, kid, nor about that woman. There are things that should remain buried." Lucy squeezed the backpack against her chest. She took a step back, then another, until she managed to run out through a crack in the collapsed wall. She ran without looking back. That night, back home, she locked doors and windows. She didn't turn on the lights. She knew she was in danger, but she also knew that she could no longer stop. Mary's story was real, and it had to be told. But first, she had to find someone who could help her protect herself. And there weren't many people she could trust. Only one. A man who had seen her fall years ago, and who had also remained silent. Lucy woke up early, although she hadn't really slept. The documents rescued from the orphanage were still on her table, open, spread out like a wound that wouldn't close. The sheet with Mary's fingerprint weighed more than any evidence, more than any photo. It was the silent proof of a mother who had been forcibly separated, ignored by the system, used, and then discarded. What she still couldn't understand was how the children had ended up in the hands of such powerful families. Who had managed that international adoption? Who benefited from Mary's silence? And why, after so many years, was someone still so interested in burying the truth? She thought about the face of the man who had followed her, his threatening tone, and the way he seemed to know her every move. And then she remembered someone. Don Ernest, the old neighbor from the boarding house in East LA. He had mentioned knowing Mary in his youth. He had said they worked near each other, that they shared a street and silences. And above all, that he knew things. Lucy hadn't fully understood what he meant at the time, but now everything took on another meaning. She left the house without breakfast. The sun barely warmed the wet sidewalks of the neighborhood, and the air smelled of freshly baked bread. She took 2 shared vans, crossed a part of East LA on foot, and arrived in front of the boarding house with the green gate where Mary had lived for a while. The door was ajar. She knocked gently. "Don Ernest?" she called. "Do you remember me?" From the back of the hallway, a thin man, with an argyle sweater and a wooden cane, poked his head out with tired but lively eyes. "Of course, Miss Lucy. It's been days since you were last here. I thought you had given up." "Never," she said. "On the contrary, I have more questions, and I think you can help me answer them." Don Ernest invited her in with a gesture. They sat in an inner courtyard, next to a dried-up bougainvillea and a forgotten wheelchair. He offered her Mexican-style coffee with brown sugar, served in a cup chipped at the rim. "Tell me what you want to know." Lucy took out Mary's notebook and put it on the table. "Did you know Gabriel?" "Mary's son?" Don Ernest was silent for several seconds. Then he nodded slowly. "I knew him, when he wasn't called Gabriel PD, but Gabriel, the boy who ran through these streets with torn shoes and dirty nails. The same one who clung to his mother's arm when he was scared. The same one who once asked me if it was true that the world was so big that she could lose him in it." Lucy swallowed. "What happened to him?" "They took him away. Him and his little brother. A well-dressed man came in a car with New Jersey license plates. It wasn't from child services. I worked with child services, I would have known. This was external. Everything was fast. Mary wasn't there. It was one night. Afterward, when she returned and couldn't find her children, she went crazy. She screamed in the streets. She threw herself on the sidewalk. No one did anything. No one wanted to get involved. I took her to her room and left her to cry alone." "Did you never find out who that man was?" Don Ernest shook his head. "But I saw him again years later, in a newspaper, in a section on successful business people. His name was Julian de la Pena. He said he had adopted 2 children abroad, but one was Mexican. That child was Gabriel. I recognized him." "Are you sure?" "As sure as my name is Ernest. That boy's eyes, they were the same. And I also saw his daughter, Patricia. I don't know if she knows the story. I don't know if she ignores it or hides it. But that woman, she looks more like Mary than she herself imagines. Lucy listened with absolute attention. Every word fell like a piece in the puzzle. There were no longer any doubts. Gabriel had been illegally adopted, relocated, renamed. He was given a new life, but at the cost of breaking another, that of his mother. Did Mary ever talk to you about it directly? Once. She told me, I don't want my children to live with rage. I prefer that they think I forgot them than for them to know that they were searched for and sold. That's what she said. As if carrying the guilt was her way of protecting them. Lucy felt her eyes well up. Do you know where she might be now? No. But if Mary is still walking this world, she shouldn't be far from silence. She didn't want revenge. She only wanted to find them, hug them one last time, and if it wasn't possible, at least make sure they were alive. Lucy put the notebook away with trembling hands. She thanked the old man for everything and said goodbye. But as she left the boarding house, she stopped. A few feet away, leaning against a post, was the same man in the cap, now without hiding. Lucy gritted her teeth, quickened her pace, and walked away among the stalls of the nearby market. That man wasn't following Mary. He was following Lucy, and he was no longer hiding. The next thing he would do wouldn't be just watching. Lucy walked aimlessly for several blocks, her thoughts as tangled as the traffic on the Tlalpan Causeway at rush hour. She had managed to leave the boarding house without the mysterious man approaching her, but she no longer had any doubts. He was following her. Not Mary. Her. What she held in her hands, the notebook, the photographs, the orphanage documents, had become more than a story. It had become a risk. She reached the public library in the Alamos neighborhood, a modest building, but quiet, almost empty, with long wooden tables and dusty shelves. There she could think calmly. She sat in the back, took out the oldest notebook, and began to review it again, looking for something she might have overlooked. And it was there, between the folded pages, that she found a loose sheet, written in blue ink, wrinkled at the edges. It was folded into 4, as if it had been secretly kept for years. It was a letter. The penmanship was unmistakable, Mary's. Firmer than in the rest of the notebook, as if that letter had been written in a moment of absolute clarity or total despair. Lucy unfolded it and began to read. My children, I don't know where you are, or if you will ever read this. Perhaps you already have another family, another language, another life. Perhaps you hate me. Perhaps you forgot me. But I didn't forget you. Every day that passes, I feel further away, but I hear you in my memories, Gabriel laughing with his mouth full of beans, Thomas asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. They took everything from me. They made me sign papers I didn't understand, under threats I couldn't face. They promised me it was temporary, that they just needed help settling you. I, innocent, trusted, and when I returned, you were no longer there. Lucy stopped for a moment. Her breathing was heavy. She felt every word weigh on her chest like a brick. She continued reading. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I never left you willingly, that my silence was not cowardice, but protection. People forget that poor women don't decide, they only obey, and I obeyed not to die. But living without you has been a daily death. If anyone ever comes across these words, if this story ever comes to light, I'm not looking for pity, only justice. And I hope, even if it's late, for one last look from my children. With eternal love, Mum. The ink on the bottom edge was smeared, Was it a tear? A spot of moisture? Impossible to know. But Lucy felt she was touching the living skin of Mary's pain. She carefully put the letter in a new envelope and placed it at the bottom of her backpack, along with the other evidence. That letter was more powerful than any official file, because the truth was in there. Raw, irrefutable, painful. That night, Lucy did not return home. She couldn't. She knew the man who was following her could be waiting for her. Instead, she went to a friend's apartment, Sylvia, in the Narvart neighborhood. She only explained part of what she was doing. Sylvia offered her a blanket and a sleeping pad on the floor. Lucy accepted without asking more. The next morning, she went straight to find the only legal contact she could trust, Attorney Torres. The same one who had once told her about Mary and who, according to him, had been looking for her for years for an unclaimed inheritance. She found him in his office on Marseille Street in the Juarez neighborhood, an old building with small offices and dark hallways. Torres received her with a mixture of surprise and urgency in his eyes. "What are you doing here, Lucy?" he said as soon as he closed the door. "I've been looking for you for days." "I need answers too," she replied, "and protection. But first, I need you to see this." She showed him the letter, then the photos, then the partially burned orphanage admission record. The attorney didn't say anything for several minutes. He just read. He touched the paper as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. This is enough to open an investigation," he finally murmured. "But it's also enough for certain powerful names to do everything possible to bury it." "Like whom?" "Do you remember the Della Pena family?" Lucy nodded. "Well, they are not just business people. They also have political ties, banks, foundations, friends in power. And what you have here not only reveals an illegal adoption, it reveals that they built a fortune on a lie, on a theft." Lucy swallowed. "So what do I do?" "I protect you, but I need to know something. Are you going to see this through to the end?" Lucy looked him in the eyes. "Yes, for Mary, and for the children who have been searching for her without knowing it." The attorney sighed. "Then be prepared, because this is just beginning." At that moment, his assistant knocked on the door. She entered quickly with a worried expression. "Attorney, there's a man asking for you. He didn't give a name, but he says he's from the Della Pena family, and he wants to talk. Now." Torres and Lucy looked at each other. They didn't say a word, but they both understood the same thing. They had been found, and this time, they hadn't come to talk. Lucy and Attorney Torres remained in complete silence after the assistant closed the office door. Outside, the sound of firm and deliberate footsteps approached along the carpeted hallway. Neither of them moved. Both knew they couldn't afford a mistake. The man who appeared before them was not the same one with the cap, but he carried the same air, that kind of presence that commands with just an entrance. He was tall, with a sharp face, slicked back hair, and an unwrinkled dark suit. His smile was more of a threat than a courtesy. "Good afternoon," he said, addressing Torres directly. "My name is Robert Seren. I'm external legal counsel for the Della Pena family. I just came to ask a few questions." Lucy stood up immediately. "What do you want?" "Calm down, young lady. I just came to clear up certain rumors. It's said that you have been collecting sensitive information that involves names that shouldn't be on just anyone's lips." Torres interrupted. "If you have something to say it clearly. This is a legal office, and you are here without a formal appointment." Robert looked down at the open folder on the desk, where Mary's letter, partially folded, stood out. "I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I'll just say this. What you are looking for, if it continues to progress, could drag a lot of people down. Not everyone is willing to see their story rewritten. Some of us prefer things to stay as they are, for everyone's good, especially yours, Miss Lucy. Torres took a step forward. Is that a threat? Is that advice? Robert turned around and left without waiting for an answer. Lucy, still standing, felt a tremor run through her legs. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something colder, something that told her she was no longer in a game of emotional revelations. She was touching the core of a network of secrets that for decades had been protected with power, money, and silence. Torres sat down again, running a hand over his face. We have to move fast. If these people have already shown their face, it's because they know we are close to something they cannot allow to be published. Lucy nodded, although her voice was lost. What I don't understand, she finally said, is why everyone is looking for Mary, but no one knows where she is. What if they did something to her? That's what worries me the most, Torres said. No one has seen her since that incident on the bus, and I have the feeling that her disappearance was not accidental. Lucy left the office with her mind racing in 1,000 directions. She walked away quickly, without taking transportation, crossing streets without looking at the traffic lights, searching through her thoughts for something to guide her. She had the notebook, the photos, the burned records, the letter, and now a direct threat. She passed by a convenience store and bought a prepaid phone. She wouldn't use her main number again. Then, from a phone booth, she called the hospital where she had last seen Mary, the small medical center in Tacuba. She asked to speak with the nurse who attended her. "The patient Maria Rivers," the woman on the other end replied. "We don't have any patient with that name right now. She is not registered. But she was here a few weeks ago. Old, thin, she wore a dark shawl. She left without notice." "Oh, yes. I think I remember her. But she didn't come back, and no one came to ask about her. Although, wait." There was a long pause. Then the voice returned with a lower tone. "A man came a few days ago asking about her. He said he was her nephew. Very polite, dressed in a suit. He left a number for us to contact him if she returned. But I didn't like something about him. He didn't seem like family. He seemed something else." Lucy asked for the number. She pretended she was the woman's niece, that she needed to contact her. They dictated an 8-digit line. It had no name, no address. That night, she returned to Sylvia's apartment. She told her the bare minimum. She said Mary was in danger, that she had to find her before others found her first. "What if they already found her?" Sylvia asked, her voice barely audible. Lucy didn't answer. She got up in the middle of the night and turned on the lamp from her backpack. She took out the notebook one more time. She checked every page looking for something she might have missed. It was then that she saw a folded piece of paper at the bottom of the inner pocket, barely bigger than a card, worn, with smeared ink. It was a receipt from a pharmacy in San Miguel, California. Date, 4 days ago. Lucy froze. How had that receipt gotten there? Did Mary save it? Did someone else leave it? Was it a mistake? She couldn't know. But she did know one thing. If there was a minimal possibility that Mary had been in San Miguel, she had to go. And if she didn't find her there, she probably wouldn't find her ever again. Patricia Della Pena's house in the Bel Air neighborhood was the complete opposite of the world Mary had inhabited. High ceilings, Italian marble, windows overlooking the garden, a magazine kitchen, and a silence so controlled that even the air seemed rehearsed. But that morning, that order had been broken. Patricia was pacing back and forth in the study, barefoot, her hair loose, and her hands freezing. Her eyes were swollen, but not from crying. but from not sleeping. Since that day on this bus, something had changed inside her, even if she didn't want to admit it out loud. At first, she ignored it. She buried it. She was just an old woman, she told herself. Just another one getting in the way on public transport. But what haunted her afterward wasn't the push, nor the faces of the other passengers, nor even the contempt of people when they found out about the incident. It was the look. The exact seconds when that woman, on the floor, looked at her with moist eyes, not of physical pain, but of something deeper, disappointment, recognition. And then the nightmare began. First there were the dreams, then the comments in her social circle. Then the news leaked by the local press. In a matter of days, she lost the contract with the agency she worked for. Neighbors began to treat her with disguised pity. And her father, who had worked so hard to build an impeccable image of the Della Pena family, barely spoke to her. A week after the incident, Patricia received a call from the family law firm. It wasn't a conversation. It was an order. Stay out of it. Don't open your mouth. Don't answer anything to anyone. And if anyone asks about that woman, you don't know who she is. Patricia obeyed. But something was stirring inside her. Until an envelope appeared under her door. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. Her, pushing the elderly woman on the bus, frozen at the exact moment Mary's body collapsed to the floor. And a word, handwritten, in red ink. Do you recognize her? That day she began to look for answers on her own. First, she contacted an independent journalist, then a former Child Services Agency employee who put her in touch with a woman who had worked at the convent in Cuernavaca. And little by little, as she asked questions, always discreetly, the name Mary Della Pena began to appear more frequently. What made her stop dead was not suspicion, it was confirmation. One night, rummaging through her father's old papers, hidden in a locked filing cabinet, she found a folder with old documents, contracts, records, and a sheet more yellowed than the others. A certificate of adoption for a 6-year-old boy, dated 1972. Original name, Gabriel D.P. Her father. She read it 3 times. She felt the floor moving beneath her feet. Mary, was she her grandmother? The dizziness forced her to sit down. She couldn't cry. She couldn't scream. She only thought of that look on the bus, that look of someone who recognized and who was not allowed to speak. Then she understood. Mary had looked at her not as a stranger, not as a rude young woman on public transport, but as a part of her, as a granddaughter. And Patricia pushed her to the floor without knowing she was rejecting her own blood. For the following days, she couldn't eat. She barely slept. She avoided her father. When she saw him, she only remembered that sheet in her hands, that name hidden for decades. And then the second envelope appeared, this time with a copy of the torn letter Mary had written to her children. Patricia read every word with her heart in her throat. There was no hatred in the letter, no demands, only a desperate plea to be remembered. Patricia sprang up from her bed. She went straight to her closet. She took out an old backpack, packed cash, comfortable clothes, a notebook, and tiptoed down the stairs. Outside, the sky was beginning to turn red. She took a taxi to the North Bus station. She asked for a ticket to San Miguel, California, because if that woman was still alive, she had to find her before she died without answers. But she didn't know that someone else was already on their way, and that not everyone wanted Mary to be found alive. Lucy arrived at the observatory bus terminal at dawn. She had decided to travel alone to San Miguel, California. She didn't notify Attorney Torres or Sylvia. She didn't even leave a note, not out of distrust, but out of instinct. Something inside her told her that this stretch had to be travelled in silence. The pharmacy receipt wasn't just a clue, it was a presence. Mary had been there, alive, just 4 days ago. And if someone else knew it, like that man in the dark suit who threatened her in the office, then time was against her. During the 4-hour journey, she couldn't sleep. She reread the torn letter, mentally reviewed the names that appeared in the notebook, and looked again at the burned photograph she still kept. Mary, Gabriel, and Thomas. It was no longer just about knowing if she was alive. It was about finding her before they silenced her again. And this time, forever. She arrived in San Miguel with a closed stomach, but a determined heart. The first thing she did was visit the pharmacy from the receipt. She asked naturally if anyone remembered an elderly woman, thin, with a shawl, who had been there that week. The young man attending hesitated for a few seconds, but then nodded. Yes, a lady like that came in. She walked very slowly. She asked me for a cream for joint pain. I asked her if she needed help, but she only told me she lived nearby. She went around Rose Alley. Lucy thanked him and walked out. The alley was narrow, cobblestone, with stone walls and old wooden gates. She went through each one, knocking on doors, asking without insisting too much, until a grey-haired woman, sitting on a chair next to a blue gate, answered her. The lady with the black shawl? Yes, I saw her. She went into the tertiary sisters' hospice 3 days ago. She was carrying a small bag of sweet rolls and an envelope in her hand. Lucy felt a jolt run down her spine. Hospice? Yes, it's a small place at the end of this street. The little nuns take care of elderly people who don't have family there. Sometimes they only stay a few days. Other times they never leave. Lucy quickened her pace. She reached an iron gate with no name, only a small wooden cross carved into it. She rang the bell and waited. A young nun, with a calm gaze, opened it for her. Are you here to see Mrs. Mary? Lucy held her breath. Is she here? The nun nodded, but lowered her voice. She is very weak. She arrived with a fever. She said she didn't want hospitals, just a roof to sleep under in peace. Since yesterday, she hasn't wanted to speak, but she left something, in case someone came asking for her. She took out an old envelope, sealed with a red string. It had firm handwriting on the front. Sister Clara, in case someone comes looking for me. Lucy opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten note with slow but legible strokes. If anyone is reading this, don't look for me anymore. I don't have the strength to keep running. If my story is worth anything, keep it well. But I don't want cameras or justice in courtrooms. I just wanted to tell the truth once before I leave. If my children ever ask about me, tell them I didn't forget them, that I was their mother every day, even if they didn't know it. Below, the signature, Mary Della Pena. Lucy pressed her lips together. She couldn't cry yet, not without seeing her, not without knowing if she could still hear her name. The nun led her down a cool hallway with open doors and the smell of incense. In the last room, illuminated barely by the light coming through a small window, she was there. Mrs. Mary, lying on a simple bed, with a thin face, her skin even lighter than the last time. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell slowly. Lucy approached slowly. Mrs. Mary, it's me, Lucy. Do you remember me? The woman didn't open her eyes, but her hand moved, as if searching for something in the air. Lucy took it gently. She felt it warm, fragile. I found her. Everything she left me, I have it. I already know what they did to her, and I'm not going to keep quiet about it. Then, without opening her eyes, Mary murmured, I already knew that you would come. Lucy burst into silent tears, not letting go of her hand. She didn't know how much time passed. When she left the room, the nun told her that Mary had arrived alone, leaving instructions that she didn't want funerals or ceremonies, only that if someone came, this envelope should be given to them. She didn't leave another name, no contact. Yes, the nun said, suddenly remembering. She left a list with 3 names. One was you, another, Attorney Torres, and the third, a Patricia Della Pena. Lucy froze. Patricia? She came? No. But Mary wrote her name down anyway. At that moment, a black car parked in front of the hospice. 2 men got out. They didn't carry flowers. They didn't wear mourning. One of them was Robert Serran. Lucy took a step back. They already knew Mary was dead. But what they didn't know was that her story could no longer be buried. Lucy didn't react immediately when she saw Robert Serran get out of the black car, parked in front of the hospice. It was as if time was suspended in her chest, as if for a second her body hesitated between running or staying. But she didn't move. She watched him carefully from the shadow of the inner entryway. Serran was accompanied by another younger man in a light grey jacket who kept his face bowed toward his cell phone. They entered without ringing the bell, as if they knew exactly where they were going. Lucy didn't intercept them. Instead, she backed away down the corridor to the hospice's back exit, where one of the nuns, seeing her pale, asked if she was okay. Lucy nodded and said she had to make an urgent call. She didn't say to whom. She walked down the street until she found a coffee shop with internet connection. From there, she dialed Attorney Torres's private number. "Attorney, they arrived," she said as soon as she heard his voice. "They came for Mary. It's too late." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then Torres spoke in a dry tone. "Are you sure?" "Yes, it's Robert Serran, the same one who came to your office. They didn't come to console anyone. They didn't bring flowers. They came to control what is said, to erase what they can." "Lucy, listen to me. You have to get out of there. There is nothing more you can do in that place. The important thing now is that what you know doesn't disappear with her." Lucy pressed the cell phone to her ear. "I'm not going to run away. Mary left me evidence, names, dates. Patricia is on her way. We have to do something with all this. They can't silence us." Torres didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "I'll see you tomorrow at my office. Bring everything with you. Don't trust anyone, not even the people at the hospice. If Mary left anything else, it's not there anymore." Lucy hung up and called a taxi. She didn't go back to the hospice. Not out of fear, but because she understood that Mary's story was no longer in one single place. It was already in the hands of those who needed to tell it. That night, Lucy slept in a simple hostel, with the curtains closed, her backpack next to the pillow, and Mary's letter under her shirt. The next day, she returned to New York City before noon and went straight to Torres' office. The attorney was waiting for her with a thick folder on his desk. When Lucy sat down, he handed it to her. "This arrived last night. It's from the San Jose Notarial Archive. I don't know who leaked it, but it contains the original documents of Mary Della Pena's inheritance. There are the assets registered in her name before the dispossession, and also the testimony she gave in 1981, when she declared she had lost her children due to an irregular adoption managed by private intermediaries." Lucy opened the folder with tense fingers. She recognized Mary's signature, the same stroke she had seen in the notebook, in the letter, in the envelopes. "All this," she murmured. "Did she report it?" "Yes, and it was filed away, classified as a closed case due to lack of evidence. The same year Gabriel Della Pena was legally adopted by his current family. Lucy looked up. What do we do with this? Torres looked at her seriously. He was no longer the calculating lawyer who had received her weeks ago. Now his eyes reflected a mixture of rage, powerlessness, and determination. We are going to make this story known, but not on TV, not in a courtroom that dismisses it as an old case. We're going to document it, deliver it to the right journalists, protect you legally, and above all, protect Patricia if she's willing to talk. Lucy closed the folder tightly. Mary's name was no longer just in an old notebook. It was in official records, letters, testimonies, in the eyes of a granddaughter who was beginning to remember, and in a story that, even after death, kept breathing. At that moment, the attorney's cell phone rang. He answered. His expression changed instantly. "Who?" he said, and then stood up abruptly. He hung up, looked at Lucy with a tense face. It was a contact in the district attorney's office. Someone filed an anonymous complaint against you. They allege that you manipulated documents and that you are impersonating someone. Lucy felt a pit in her stomach. Who? I don't know. But they've already issued a summons for you. This is not a coincidence, Lucy. They want to stop you before you speak. Lucy was silent for a few seconds, and then, with a firm voice, she said, Then let's speak first. Now. And to the people it hurts the most. Because while they try to silence us, Patricia has arrived. And she wants answers. Torres's office, that morning, smelled of old papers and contained tension. Lucy had barely taken a seat when they heard a sharp knock on the door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a firm rap with the knuckles, like someone who isn't asking for permission. The attorney's assistant opened it cautiously. In the doorway was a man in his 40s, with a white shirt, a neat beard, and a gaze that didn't waver. He held a leather folder in one hand and a white envelope in the other. Is this where you are looking for Mary Delapena? Lucy turned towards Torres. He narrowed his eyes and stood up. Who are you? The man didn't smile. He entered without asking, closed the door behind him, and placed the envelope on the desk. My name is Michael Herrera, and I believe I am her son. Lucy felt everything stop for an instant. Do you have proof of that? Torres asked, suspicious. Michael nodded and opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents, an adoption certificate dated 1972, a transfer of minor's certificate from the Child Services Agency, and a handwritten letter, with faded ink, signed by an unknown mother who asked for her children to be given to a family that could provide them with a roof and education if she failed to return. Lucy recognized it instantly. The penmanship, the way she signed, the pain disguised as resignation. It was Mary. Where did you get this? She asked with a tense voice. My adoptive mother gave me that letter shortly before she died. She always told me I wasn't her biological son, but that they loved me as such. It wasn't until I turned 30 that I decided to search. I never found anything, until a few weeks ago, when I saw a story online about a woman who was pushed on a bus. I knew, without knowing why, that there was something of me in her. And why are you showing up now? Torres insisted. Why didn't you speak before? Michael looked him in the eyes. Because I was scared. Because I didn't want to stir up old wounds. Because there are very powerful people who would prefer that this story never be told. Lucy took out the notebook. She opened it to the page where Mary had written, in shaky ink, Gabriel and Thomas, May 4, 1971. She showed Michael the list, the photo, the letter. Was your birth name Thomas? That's what they told me, but everything was erased with the adoption process. My current certificate says Michael Herrera, nothing else. Torres narrowed his eyes. And do you know anything about your brother? Michael shook his head. No, but I always dreamed of him. As a child, I said I had a brother in the north who called me in my dreams. I never knew if it was imagination or a buried memory. Lucy took a deep breath. She knew Michael's appearance changed everything. It confirmed that Mary had told the truth, that the papers existed, that the children existed, that her story wasn't the madness of a forgotten old woman. But she also knew that it wouldn't resolve anything if they didn't find the other, Gabriel. Michael, did you ever see this photo? She asked, showing him the black and white image that Mary had kept as a treasure. In it, the two children appear with their mother, embracing. Michael looked at it for a long time. Then he looked up with contained tears. That was us. That's me. Torres put the folder with the documents in a locked drawer. Lucy, we have to move. This has legal weight. But before taking any action, Patricia must know. Lucy nodded. She was about to go look for her just as the attorney's phone rang insistently. He answered it. His face became tense in seconds. What happened? Silence. Are you sure? Another silence. Thank you for letting me know. He hung up. He looked at Lucy. Patricia went to San Miguel. She was at the hospice just a few hours after you, and now she's disappeared. Lucy paled. What do you mean, disappeared? There is no record of her returning to the city. Her cell phone is off. The last time she was seen was talking to a nun at the exit of the hospice and getting into a black car that wasn't a public service vehicle. Lucy jumped up abruptly. We have to find her. If she already knows everything, she's the next target. Michael looked at them, confused, but willing. I'm coming with you. Lucy looked him straight in the eye. It wasn't time to hesitate. Good, because this is just beginning. And we're not going to lose anyone else. Not Patricia. Not the truth. The morning Patricia was reported missing, Lucy felt for the first time that time was no longer on her side. It wasn't just Mary who had been silenced, hidden, manipulated. Now there was another woman, alive, aware, awake, who was also in danger. And this time, it was someone who not only knew the truth, but was part of it. Lucy and Michael left Attorney Torres's office with an address in hand, the last approximate geolocation of Patricia's cell phone before it was turned off. A contact of Torres, a former detective, had obtained this data for them, and it pointed to a house on the outskirts of Detroit, in a gated community that didn't appear on common maps. A secluded, discreet place, perfect for keeping someone away from the noise. The drive was long. Michael was driving. Although he had only found out about his possible origin a few hours ago, his gaze was no longer that of an ordinary man. It was that of someone who understood, deep in his chest, that his life had been built on secrets. What if she's not there? Lucy asked, watching the highway pass by the window. Then we'll keep looking. But if she knows what we know now, they won't let her talk easily. Lucy nodded. She leaned her forehead against the glass. She closed her eyes. And remembered. She remembered the last time Mary spoke of her children out loud. It was shortly before she died. Not with rage, not with reproach. It was with that resigned peace of someone who no longer expects justice, but wishes the truth to survive, even if she doesn't. And Lucy had promised something, in silence, squeezing the hand of that fragile woman in the hospice, that she wouldn't let them bury her with lies. When they arrived at the gated community, the entrance gate was closed, guarded by an elderly guard who seemed more asleep than attentive. Michael got out of the car, approached the access module, and said they had come to see Mrs. Alice Rowe, an invented excuse. The guard didn't even ask for ID. He just pressed a button and the arm went up. The number they were looking for was 7B. A modern house, white facade, dark windows, electric gate. There was no doorbell. There was no sign of life. Lucy got out of the car with a pounding heart. "I'm going to knock. Be careful." She knocked on the door 3 times. Nothing. She waited. She knocked again, harder. And just as she was about to speak, a soft voice was heard from inside. "Who is there?" It was Patricia. Lucy shuddered. "It's me. Lucy." There was silence, a long silence. And then the gate slowly opened. Patricia appeared behind it. She wasn't beaten. She wasn't tied up. But her face was different. Pale, sunken eyes, deep dark circles. She looked older, more tired, as if she had aged 10 years in 3 days. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a hoarse voice. "We came for you. You disappeared." No one knew anything. "I didn't disappear. They brought me." "Did they hold you?" Patricia didn't answer. She walked into the house. Lucy and Michael followed her. Inside, everything was clean, orderly, sterile, as if no one really lived there. They sat in the living room. Patricia drank some water. Then she spoke. "When I left the hospice, a man was waiting for me. He said he was from the family, that they wanted to protect me. He offered to take me to a safe place. I accepted. I thought they wanted to explain everything to me. But when we got here, they took my cell phone. They told me I couldn't make calls until things calmed down. They didn't lock me up. But I couldn't leave. They watched me." Lucy gritted her teeth. "Who was that man?" "Robert Serran." Lucy exchanged a look with Michael. "Patricia, you need to know that Mary has died, that she left us documents, letters, photos. We know what happened to your grandparents. We know your father was Gabriel, and that he knew the truth, and he hid it." Patricia closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I know. I found out recently. I checked his papers. I found his original birth certificate. The Della Pena last name was there. The date of admission to the orphanage, the adoption signature. Everything. He never told you?" "Never, but I think he always knew that someday I would find out. There was something in the way he looked at old people on the street. Something like shame." Lucy took Mary's notebook from her backpack. She placed it on the table. Patricia recognized it instantly. She touched it as if touching a sacred object. "She wrote everything down?" "Yes, day by day, year by year, until the end." Patricia took a deep breath. Then she stood up. She walked to a shelf. She took out an envelope. "Before he died, my father left me this. He told me not to open it until I saw her with my own eyes." Lucy took it. Inside was a letter, written in shaky handwriting. "Patricia, if you ever read this, it's because you already know who Mary is. I recognized her when I saw her on the news. Yes, daughter, that woman on the bus was your grandmother. And yes, I was the one who left her behind. I was scared of losing everything I had built. But you are better than me. Do the right thing. Don't let this story die out." Silence filled the room, until Patricia spoke. "I'm going to speak. In public. Where everyone hears it. And I'm going to say her name. Mary Della Pena was not crazy. She was a mother who was torn away. And she deserves justice." Michael smiled with glassy eyes. Lucy hugged her. And then a gunshot rang out. Close by. Inside the gated community, and the silence was broken forever. The gunshot didn't last more than a second. but the echo reverberated throughout the entire gated community like a warning. Lucy, Patricia, and Michael froze. For a couple of seconds, no one spoke. No one breathed. Outside, distant shouts were heard, running footsteps, the screech of a door being slammed open. Michael was the first to react. He jumped up, ran to the main entrance of the house, and locked the gate from the inside. He returned with a tense face, his hands clenched. "That wasn't far away," he said. Patricia remained silent, pale, with a lost gaze. Lucy took her cell phone from her pocket, dialed Torres, but the call wouldn't go through. No signal, no network. As if the gated community was inside an invisible wall. "They've blocked everything," she murmured. "What if it wasn't a message?" Michael said in a firm voice. "What if it was a warning? For us?" No one answered, because they knew it. Lucy got up, walked to her backpack, and took out Mary's notebook. She placed it in the center of the table like someone placing the most fragile piece of a story that no one wanted to hear for decades. "We have to finish what she started. Now. Here." Patricia looked at it. Her face was no longer shaking. Her voice didn't waver. "Let's read everything. From the beginning. I need to know what she went through. I need to carry that. If I'm going to speak, let it be with every word of her story on my skin." Lucy nodded. She opened the notebook to the first page. There were no dates, only a phrase written with a firm stroke. No one should live believing that their mother abandoned them without a fight. Silence filled the space as Lucy began to read. Mary's story, from her first eviction, the day they left her on the street with 2 children asleep in her arms. Then the early mornings at the terminal, where she hid the little ones between old blankets so the police wouldn't see them. The convent, the promise, the betrayal. They told me they would only be there for 2 weeks, that it was a procedure, that they would return with me. But when I came back, they were gone. They wouldn't give them back to me. They told me they weren't mine anymore. Lucy read. Patricia cried in silence. Michael, with his elbows on his knees, covered his mouth with his hands, as if containing a scream. My mistake was trusting. I thought that if I signed, I was protecting them. But I signed their sentence to oblivion. They sent them far away. I didn't know where. And no one wanted to give me names. They just told me, "They are fine now," as if that were enough. The pages were full of interrupted annotations. Mary wrote at night, after work. She recounted every failed attempt to find them, every door that was closed in her face. One, in particular, shook the 3 of them. A man offered to help me find Thomas, but he asked for something in return. He told me that if I signed a paper giving up all rights, he would give me their new addresses. I did it. He never gave them to me. He told me, "They are not yours anymore. Leave them in peace." Lucy took a deep breath. That paper, that must be the one the lawyer found, the one they used to justify the adoptions. Michael gently hit the table with a closed fist. He didn't say anything. Patricia got up. She walked to a window. She opened the curtains. Outside, the trees swayed in the wind, but no one was in sight. No patrol cars, no ambulances. Just the still air of fear. "How can there be so much pain in a single life?" she said. "And how were we so blind?" Lucy looked at her with tenderness, but with strength. "It wasn't you. It was an entire system designed to bury people like her, to take away even the right to be remembered." They continued reading. Mary wrote about her life as a housekeeper, the bosses who humiliated her, the clients who pretended not to see her. But every night, at the end of every workday, she wrote 2 names, Gabriel, and Thomas. I didn't find them today either, but I'm still here. The last part of the diary was different. The handwriting was shakier, the phrases were shorter. There was no more search, only nostalgia. Today I dreamed that Gabriel was telling me, "Mom, I've grown up." And I answered him, "Me too, son," but downwards. Lucy closed the notebook carefully. No one spoke for several minutes. "She didn't die in that hospice," Patricia said in a low voice. "She died every time she signed a paper without understanding it. Every time a door was denied to her. Every time she asked about us, and there was no answer." Michael looked at her. "But now there is." Lucy got up. She went to her backpack and took out a small recorder. "Are you ready to talk?" Patricia nodded. "Yes, but not for a camera." "Not yet. First, I want everything to be recorded, just as she did." Lucy pressed the red button. The recorder began to register Patricia's voice, her story, her truth, the recognition, the guilt, the forgiveness. And at that moment, while they were talking, a notification appeared on Lucy's phone. An email. No subject. No clear sender. Only an attached file with the name Delapena, Confidential PDF. Lucy opened it. It was notarial documents, transcriptions of calls, internal emails between business people, forged signatures, payments, everything. A complete network of illegal adoptions. And at the center of everything, the name of Julian Delapena, Patricia's father. And then they knew that what was coming was not just justice. It was war. The attached file that Lucy received that night, titled Delapena Confidential PDF, was not a simple document. It was a bomb. 120 pages of email transcriptions, internal memos, covert bank transfers, letters sealed by vanished notaries, and special adoption contracts signed by doctors, judges, and child services agency officials. All related to a single name, Julian Delapena. Lucy and Patricia sat together in front of the laptop in the living room of that house, still locked from the inside, in the same gated community where, just a few hours earlier, someone had fired a weapon to warn them they were getting too close. But it was no longer possible to stop. The truth was there. Mary, even after death, spoke through those documents. "Who sent this?" Michael asked, standing behind them, reading over their shoulders. "I don't know," Lucy said. "There is no signature, no visible email, only that file." "What if it was someone from the inside?" Patricia said in a low voice. "Someone who couldn't keep quiet anymore." Lucy opened the file carefully, reviewing each page as if disarming a trap. The first documents were private adoption contracts, dated between 1969 and 1984. Several had the Delapena and Associates office as the legal beneficiary. In them, minors handed over under irregular circumstances were listed, many with references to orphanages and convents that were already closed. One sheet, in particular, chilled the blood of the three. Case DP 1171, name of minor, Gabriel DP. Date of admission, May 4, 1971. Institution, St. Teresa's Convent, Cuernavaca. Observations, minor of 6 years, brother of another minor. Thomas, admitted by the biological mother under pressure. Adoption recommended for political reasons and institutional convenience. Signed by Julian Delapena, Provisional Guardian. Seal, Child Services Agency, National Reserved Affairs Directorate. "Institutional convenience," Lucy whispered. "What does that mean?" "That everything was negotiated from above," said Torres, who had just arrived and was listening from the entrance. "That it wasn't a mistake, or an omission. It was a business. And your father, Patricia, not only allowed it, he led it." No one spoke. The weight of the revelation was greater than rage, greater than fear. It was devastating. Torres placed a new folder on the table. "And this," he continued, "just reached me this afternoon. A copy of Mary Della Pena's original will, dated 15 years ago. In it, she states that her assets, land in Texas, a family home in Philadelphia, and a frozen bank account, will pass into the hands of her biological children if they were ever found. If not, to the closest granddaughter willing to preserve her story." "Granddaughter?" Patricia asked, her voice cracking. "You," Torres replied. "If you speak. If you decide to make this story public." Patricia lowered her gaze. She closed her eyes. Then slowly she took the folder and held it in her hands. "I'm going to do it." Torres nodded. "But before you speak," Lucy raised her voice, "if you're going to do it, don't do it alone. Let's do it together. Mary wasn't just your grandmother. She was the grandmother of all those who have been silenced by this country, by this system. There are many women like her, invisible, erased, forgotten. Let's not let this story be just one more." Michael squeezed Patricia's hand on the table. "And if there is anything I can do as her son, I will do it. I don't care about the last name I have now. I want the one I lost." That night, they recorded a full statement. Patricia read fragments of Mary's diary. Lucy showed the documents. Michael confessed his story without hesitation. The video was not published on social media. It was handed over to an investigative journalist with a clean record who had exposed fraudulent adoption scandals years ago. The material was sent to 3 more media outlets for security. If anything happened to any of them, the story would continue. There was no going back. At dawn, a dark grey van parked in front of the house. 4 men got out. They wore black glasses, radios in their hands, but no insignia. They didn't knock on the door. They just waited. Lucy, from the window, observed them in silence. "They're coming for us," she said. Torres approached. "They don't have a warrant. They can't do anything. But they can intimidate. They will. They've done it before." Patricia stood up forcefully. "Let them try. I'm not afraid anymore. Because now I know that Mary lived, and that she died knowing that not everything was lost." And at that instant, Lucy's phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. She answered. A shaky male voice spoke from the other end. "Lucy Miller, it's Gabriel, and I need to know if she forgave me." The silence that took over the room was absolute. None of the 3, Lucy, Patricia, or Michael, moved after the call. The phone was still in Lucy's hand, barely trembling. The voice of Gabriel, Mary's older son, had sounded fragile, muted, as if he hadn't spoken her name in years. Lucy brought the phone to her ear again. "Gabriel, where are you calling from?" A sigh answered first. Then the voice came out again, as if from very far away. "From Philadelphia. I came here to take refuge for a few days. I've been following everything you've done, since the video, the letter, the will, everything, and I couldn't take it anymore." Lucy signaled to Patricia. She approached. She gently took the phone away, held it with both hands. "Gabriel, it's Patricia." A silence. "I know," he replied quietly. "I'm your daughter." Gabriel didn't answer. Only his ragged breathing was heard. "She died, Gabriel," Patricia continued. "Mary, your mother. They buried her in a humble hospice, but she left your name written until the end." "I know," he said, and his voice changed. It broke. "I knew it since I saw her on TV, since I saw how she fell, how no one did anything. And I didn't either. I froze. She recognized me, didn't she? Patricia put her hand to her mouth. Lucy lowered her gaze. Yes, she replied. She saw you, and she recognized you. Gabriel sighed, long. I saw her many times on the street, in recent years. Sometimes I would pass through the area where she lived, in East LA. I saw her a couple of times, but I hid. I told myself it couldn't be her, that it was impossible, that she was dead, that no, she didn't have the right to come into my life again. Lucy took the phone again. Gabriel, she never left you. She didn't abandon you. She was forced to sign. She was betrayed. And you knew it. Why didn't you speak? Gabriel took a long time to answer. Because it was easier to pretend there was no story, that nothing had happened. Because I had built a life, a last name, a company. Because everyone expected me to be someone else. Because I was afraid of who I really was. Patricia wiped her tears. You have to come. It's no longer just about you, or about her, or about me. There are more people involved. There are crimes, documents, names, and now you can close this cycle. Gabriel didn't answer right away, but finally he said, I'm on the way. Tomorrow at noon I'll be in the city. I want to see her grave, and I want to ask for forgiveness, even if it's late. Lucy hung up with numb hands. Patricia hugged herself. Michael approached. Now we're all here, he murmured. But the relief was short-lived. An hour later, deep into the night, Attorney Torres gathered them in his office. His face was pale, haggard, his tie loose. We have a problem, he said bluntly. The family court has just been contacted. There is a new request registered under the name of Michael Herrera. Lucy blinked, confused. What request? Torres looked at the three of them. A petition to invalidate Mary de la Pena's will, signed 3 days ago, with false documents, but with his signature perfectly replicated. And the request says it was submitted by her son, Michael. Michael stood up abruptly. What? That's false. I know. But someone is using your name, Michael. They're preparing a dirty move. They want to tarnish your image, leave you looking like a scammer. If they manage to make it look real, they're going to accuse you of fraud, of impersonation. And not only that, they're going to overturn the will. They're going to keep everything. Again. Lucy looked at him. Michael was shaking. I never signed anything, he said. Never. I know. But this is already a legal war, and it's going to get worse. Patricia sat down, running her hands over her face. What about Gabriel? She asked. Can they use him too? Yes, Torres replied. And they will. Lucy closed her eyes. All the work, all the searching, the pain, Mary's death, Patricia's struggle, Michael's courage, everything was once again in danger. The machinery was moving. They wanted to erase every trace of truth. What do we do? Patricia said, breathless. Torres approached. He placed a sealed envelope with a red ribbon on the table. This is the last thing we have left. A certified copy of Mary's first testimony before a notary in 1983, where she talks about the adoption, the name of her children, and where she mentions a key witness who is still alive. Lucy took it. Who? Torres looked at her, his face hardened. The priest who signed the permission for the children to leave the convent. Where is he? In a nursing home, in Florida. Lucy took a deep breath. She looked at Michael. She looked at Patricia. Then we leave tomorrow. And while the three of them prepared for the last leg of that story, In the darkness of a hidden desk in the Delapena Group offices, a new document began to be drafted. A writ of injunction, a desperate attempt to stop the inevitable. Because what they didn't know was that this time, the blood had already awakened. The road to Florida was long, tense, and silent. Lucy drove with her eyes fixed on the highway as the darkness began to give way to dawn. Beside her, Michael was silent, reviewing the documents Attorney Torres had given them over and over again. Patricia, in the back seat, held Mary's notebook in her hands, as if by just touching it, she could feel her alive again. The nursing home was on the outskirts of the port, among mangroves and dirt roads worn by time. It was called St. Joachim's Home, and it was a modest building, with a tiled roof, peeling walls, and the smell of salt. But there, according to the testimony of a former Child Services Agency collaborator, lived the only direct witness who remained of the documents that snatched Mary's children from her, Father Matt. A priest who in 1971 signed an authorization without knowing, or without wanting to know, that he was signing a condemnation. Lucy, Patricia, and Michael entered the nursing home with determined steps. They were received by a nurse with a sweet voice who, as soon as she heard Father Matt's name, nodded solemnly. "He's very old now," she said. "He hardly speaks. Sometimes he has memory lapses. But there are days when he remembers everything as if it happened yesterday." She led them to a small room with a low bed, a wheelchair, and a crucifix hanging over the headboard. Father Matt was sitting next to the window, watching the sunrise with wide eyes. His skin, weathered by the years, was thin and almost transparent. His long, nervous fingers played with an intertwined rosary. "Father," Lucy said in a firm but soft voice, "forgive us for bothering you. We are family of a woman named Mary Delapena. You knew her." The priest slowly turned his head. He blinked. "Mary," he whispered, as if that name awakened something. "The one with the sad eyes." Patricia approached carefully. She showed him the notebook, a photograph, the letter. "She died recently, Father, but she left us her story, and we believe you can help us finish it." Father Matt looked at the photo in silence. Then he closed his eyes and recited, almost in prayer. "They forced her to sign. They told her it was best. They brought me a document already drafted. I only had to seal it. I didn't understand everything. They didn't explain it to me. They just said it was to ensure a better future for the children, that the mother was unstable. I obeyed." "Do you remember who brought it?" Michael asked. The priest looked at him. His eyes suddenly seemed more lucid than ever. A man in a light suit, polite, confident. He said his name was Julian Delapena. The same name, the same signature, the origin of everything. Lucy took an envelope from inside her backpack. Inside, a certified copy of the adoption document, signed by Julian and sealed by Matt himself. "This is your signature, isn't it?" The priest looked at it. He nodded slowly, and his eyes filled with tears. "I never knew what happened to her afterward. They told me she left the country, that she didn't want her children, and I believed it, because it was more comfortable to believe it, because sometimes we are also afraid." Patricia knelt beside his chair. She never left them. She looked for them all her life. "You can help us clear her name, to show that she was a victim, and that she wasn't alone." Father Matt took her hand. He squeezed it hard. "I will declare, if I still have something to offer God before I die, it will be this, not for justice, for redemption." They left the nursing home with a promise. That same afternoon, Torres would arrange the priest's formal declaration under notarial act. One more piece of evidence, one more that closed the circle of truths that had been ignored, denied, and hidden for so long. Already in the car, as they returned to the city, Lucy received a call. This time, it was Gabriel. "I'm at my mother's grave," he said with a trembling voice. "And I need to see you, all of you, tonight, at your house. I have something to say, and it can't wait anymore." "What is it?" Lucy asked. Gabriel was silent for a few seconds. "It wasn't just fear. What I did, what I hid, was more serious than you can imagine. I didn't just know the truth. I helped to silence it." The living room of the house in New York City was dimly lit. Only a floor lamp turned on in the corner cast a warm light that fell on the faces of the three people sitting in front of the table: Lucy, Patricia, and Michael. Mary's notebook rested open between them, like a fourth presence. And on the table, still vibrating with the last word of the call, was the cell phone. Gabriel had confessed his guilt. He had said he collaborated, that he helped hide. But what everyone expected now was to hear what he had to say. Patricia paced back and forth across the room, her hands clasped behind her back. Since Gabriel's call, she hadn't said a single word. Her eyes were red, but not from crying, but from contained anger. Lucy observed her. "Are you okay?" "No," she replied without stopping. "I'm not okay. Because if what Gabriel is going to say is true, then it wasn't just silence, it was betrayal." Michael looked at her with regret. "We all failed," he said. "He was scared. I understand it. I don't justify it, but I understand it. I also played blind for years. I thought it was better not to know." Patricia stopped in front of them. "No, you didn't know her. You didn't push her to the ground. You didn't grow up in a family that benefited from that broken story. I was a part of it. Even if I didn't know it, I was a part of it." Lucy stood up, approached, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "But now you know, and you're here. That is also part of seeking justice." Patricia nodded, but didn't answer. She walked toward Lucy's backpack and took out an envelope she had kept for days, the original copy of Mary's will. She placed it on the table. Next to it, she placed the diary, then the portrait, then the bracelet. "This is more than papers. This is the life of a woman who survived everything and still died alone. And while we talk about justice, there are people moving money, drafting writs of injunction, preparing lawyers." Michael clenched his fists. "What are you going to do?" Patricia looked him straight in the eye. "I'm going to speak. Tomorrow. In front of the media. With my face. With my name. And I'm going to tell everything I know, even if it costs me the last name, the house, the inheritance, or whatever is left. Because Mary deserves that. Because you deserve it." Lucy smiled with moist eyes. "You're not alone. I know." Then the doorbell rang. The three looked at each other immediately. No one was expecting anyone. It was almost midnight. Lucy walked slowly toward the door. Before opening, she looked through the peephole. Gabriel. Lucy opened the door. He was there, standing, his shoulders slumped, his hair disheveled, his eyes sunken. He looked like a different man, thinner, more real, more human. "Can I come in?" Lucy stepped aside. Gabriel entered. He crossed the room with slow steps, looked at the objects on the table, and upon seeing the open notebook, he stopped. His fingers brushed the page written with smeared ink. "Did she write this?" Lucy nodded. "Every word." Gabriel closed his eyes. He exhaled as if he had been holding his breath his whole life. I don't know where to start. At the beginning, Patricia said. Gabriel looked at her, for the first time, with a mixture of guilt, tenderness, and fear. When I was 14 years old, my father took me to his office. He showed me a file. Inside were the true records, my real name, my brother's, Mary's. He told me I came from a mistake, that they had saved me from an unstable mother, without resources, without a future. He told me that if I spoke, I would lose everything, that I had earned my last name, but that it could be erased in seconds. He taught me to be ashamed of her without knowing her. Lucy closed the notebook. Gabriel continued. At 18, I was already working with him. I started managing the legal part of the group. One day we received a notification from a rural court. A woman was claiming ties to an adopted minor. It was Mary. She was asking for access to records. I was the one who drafted the refusal. I forged a signature, and we blocked her. Patricia covered her mouth. Why? Because I didn't want to lose everything I had built. Because it was easier to erase than to face. But when I saw her on the bus, when I saw her on the floor, I understood that not all the money, nor the suits, nor the last name had made me anything more than a coward. Lucy looked at him in silence. And now? Gabriel swallowed. I want to declare. I want to hand over the documents I saved. There's more. Emails, signatures, the Child Services Agency files they hid. And I want to do it face to face. Patricia hugged him, not with forgiveness, with firmness, with the recognition that, finally, Mary's broken family was beginning to mend. But when they finished talking, Lucy checked her phone. A new notification, an email, no sender, only one line of text. If Patricia speaks tomorrow, they will silence her. And they knew that, although the truth was on the right side, danger was too. The morning dawned murky over New York City. A grey sky covered the buildings and avenues like a heavy blanket, one of those that doesn't let in a ray of light or a moment of respite. Inside Torres's office, the tension was even thicker. Lucy had read the anonymous email out loud that warned about Patricia. If she speaks tomorrow, they will silence her. Since she received it, no one had slept. Everyone had taken turns watching the entrance to the building. Torres even changed the password to the server access, where he kept the documents. At this point, they knew it. The enemy was no longer hiding, and the time for whispers was over. Gabriel, sitting in front of the window, his gaze lost in the traffic, looked like a defeated man, not from fear, but from guilt. The weight of his decisions, of his silence, had finally caught up with him. Lucy looked at him out of the corner of her eye. There was something in his posture, in his crossed hands, in the way he bit the inside of his lip, that worried her, as if he were hiding something more. What exactly did you hide for so long, Gabriel? Patricia asked, without gentleness. He lowered his gaze. Papers, records, but above all, a jewel. Lucy raised an eyebrow. A jewel? Gabriel slowly got up. He reached into his briefcase and took out a small blue velvet box. He placed it on the table. Patricia opened it cautiously. Inside, there was a fine, antique, rose gold bracelet. It had 2 initials engraved, CDP. My mother gave it to me when I was a child, Gabriel said. She told me it was the only thing she had from her mother. She asked me to hide it, to never show it, because that could destroy everything. I didn't understand. I thought she was exaggerating. I kept it. And years later, when she died, I decided never to talk about it. But that jewel, it always haunted me, as if reminding me every day of what I denied. Lucy held it between her fingers. It was beautiful, simple, but loaded with history. "This matches the description Mary wrote in her notebook," she said. "A rose gold bracelet with my initials, so they never forget where they come from." Patricia felt her eyes moisten. "She never stopped talking to you, even if no one listened to her." Torres entered the room with a somber expression. "They just notified me that tomorrow, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the writ of injunction will be formally presented in court. The De La Pena office is seeking to freeze all assets linked to Mary's will, alleging manipulation of identity and inheritance fraud." "And who appears as the signatory of the writ of injunction?" Lucy asked. "Gabriel," Torres replied without hesitation. A chill fell over the room. Gabriel raised his hands. "I didn't sign that. I swear to you." "Someone used your name and your signature," Torres added. "They have access to everything. They can manipulate records. They can infiltrate public offices. If we don't act today, tomorrow this entire case goes to the dead archive. Literally." Patricia approached the window. Outside, the world continued its course. People running, cars honking, children with backpacks on their backs. No one knew what was at stake inside that room. "I have to speak today," she said. "Not tomorrow. Today. Before they deliver that writ of injunction. Before they shut our mouths." Torres stood up. "Then we'll hold a press conference. But not just anyone. We're going to summon the real journalists, the ones who investigate, the ones who don't sell out, and we'll do it at this place where everything began." Lucy narrowed her eyes. "Are you referring to the bus?" "No," he replied. "The boarding house. The house where Mary lived her last years in the city. We're going to put a face to abandonment, to injustice, to silence." Gabriel nodded. Patricia did too. Hours later, the old boarding house in East LA was once again witnessing history. Lucy, standing next to the gate, watched as the cameras, reporters, and curious neighbors arrived. No one fully understood what was about to happen, but something felt different in the air. Something that went beyond a complaint. Patricia, dressed simply, without makeup, with Mary's bracelet on her wrist, went up to the small portico and stood in front of everyone. "My name is Patricia de la Pena," she said with a clear voice. "I am the granddaughter of Mary de la Pena, and I am here to say that my family built its wealth at the cost of the pain of a woman who never stopped looking for her children." Everyone listened in silence. Only the clicking of the cameras could be heard. "Today, I give you back her name, her story, her voice." Lucy looked at the faces of the neighbors. Some were crying, others nodded. And it was then that Patricia took out a folded sheet. It was Mary's final letter. "If my children ever ask about me, tell them I didn't forget them, that I was their mother every day, even if they didn't know it. Today I am here to tell the country she was my grandmother, and I will not forget her." The applause didn't take long, but among the crowd, Lucy saw someone that made her frown. A man, in a light suit, dark glasses, the same one who followed her weeks ago, the same one who appeared in San Miguel. Now he was watching her from across the street, with a cold expression, like someone who knows they still have cards up their sleeve. Lucy lowered her gaze to her cell phone. A new notification, a message without text. Only an image, an old photograph. Mary, in the hospital, and in the background, the face of the man in the light suit accompanying her. Lucy paled. My God, he knew her. And if he knew her, maybe she never left. The image sent to Lucy's cell phone had given a brutal twist to everything they thought they knew. That man who had appeared for weeks as a mere observer, the same one who watched the hospice in San Miguel, who lingered around the boarding house, who had followed them in silence, was not just a hired thug or an envoy. He was someone who knew Mary from the inside. Lucy had the photo on her cell phone screen. It showed Mary, in a hospital gown, looking forward, and behind her, partially out of focus, the same face, the man in the light suit, dark glasses, without expression. But what was most chilling was that in the image, that man was holding her shoulder with a gentleness that did not belong to a stranger. Patricia, seeing the image, paled. She slowly approached the screen. He didn't just know her, she said in a low voice. He was with her. Before. Much earlier. Gabriel, sitting in the back of the room, looked up. Seeing the image, he let out a long sigh. His face tightened. "His name is Alexander Galvez," he said. Everyone looked at him. "Who?" Lucy asked. "My father's legal assistant for more than 20 years, his right-hand man, the one who drafted the contracts, the one who contacted the judges, the orphanages, the adoption agencies. He never talked much. He was like a ghost, but he was the one who knew everything that was moving behind every signature." Torres, who had just arrived after the press conference at the boarding house, frowned upon hearing that name. "Galvez? Yes, of course. I saw him in office meetings, always in the shadows. He never signed anything. He never appeared in official documents, but everything passed through his hands." Lucy had no doubt. He was the one who manipulated the signatures on the writ of injunction. He forged the alternate will. And if he was with Mary in the hospital, then he was probably also the one who prevented anyone from helping her before she died. Patricia put her hand to her chest. Why? What did he gain? Gabriel lowered his head. Because he believed that protecting the De La Pena last name was his duty, that everything had to remain intact, that Mary's story was a threat to us, to me, and I let him do it. The silence became dense. No one wanted to say what everyone was thinking, until Michael spoke. "We have to find him." Torres nodded. "I already asked a colleague to trace his name, but Galvez is like a ghost. He doesn't have social media. There is no registered fiscal address. The only thing we managed to get is that during the last few years, he signed several contracts as the legal representative of a real estate company that appears as the owner of the boarding house." Lucy froze. "The boarding house?" "Yes, the same one where Mary lived, where they abandoned her, where she wrote her notebook. That house was also theirs. Everything was planned, even the place where she would live to die." No one spoke. Patricia tightened the bracelet on her wrist. She looked at Gabriel. "Did you know this?" He denied it. "No, but I also didn't ask. I was a coward, until now." Lucy stood up. "We can't stay here. If Galvez is behind all this, he has to know that we've already found him. And if he knows it, he's going to move." Torres opened his briefcase. He took out a printed copy of Gabriel's original birth certificate. "Here is his real name. Here is his date of admission to the convent, his file number at the Child Services Agency, and most importantly, his blood test." Gabriel frowned. "What test?" "Mary left a biological sample years ago, at the Tacuba Hospital. It was part of a procedure when she had a respiratory crisis. Her doctor convinced her to authorize it, in case her children ever appeared. And that sample was preserved. Compared to yours, it gives a 99.7% genetic match. You are her son. Gabriel, legally and biologically, and no one can erase that. Gabriel covered his face with his hands. He wasn't crying, but he was shaking, like someone who finally touches the ground after falling for a long time. Patricia hugged him. Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. Lucy looked at the time. It was already dawn, but they couldn't stop. "Torres," she said, "what is needed so that this cannot be erased tomorrow by a bought judge?" "A public complaint, not in the media, at the federal prosecutor's office. But the three of you must appear as direct relatives with the evidence, and that we will do today." Gabriel stood up. "What about Galvez?" Torres replied bluntly. "We're going to face him, but first, we're going to corner him." Lucy turned on her cell phone. She went into the email. She drafted a new message. She addressed it to the journalists who had covered the press conference. In the subject line, a name that should never have appeared. And in the body of the message, she only put the photo, the one of Mary in the hospital, and behind her Galvez, present, always present. Without knowing that this time, silence was no longer on his side. The whole city seemed to hold its breath that morning. Outside, the sky heavy with clouds, threatened rain that wouldn't quite fall. And inside, in the house where Lucy, Patricia, Gabriel, and Michael were taking refuge, the tension was no longer a taut rope. It was an explosion about to burst. The photograph with Galvez behind Mary in the hospital had circulated. On social media, in the news, in closed groups of journalists. There was no one who hadn't seen it in the last 24 hours. Some doubted its authenticity, others defended it fiercely. But no one could deny that something deeper was stirring. For the first time in years, the names Della Pena and Della Pena appeared together in the same article. Lucy hadn't slept. She was reviewing for the third time the digital files she still had of Mary's diary, scanned page by page. She was looking for something she had missed. Any reference to Galvez, any indirect mention. And there it was. A note in the margin of an almost forgotten page, written in smaller handwriting. One of those who promised me he would look for Thomas had cold eyes. His name was Alexander. I never knew his last name, but he had access to offices I didn't know. He promised to help me. And then he disappeared. Lucy marked that paragraph with a red pen and printed it. She knew that in the hands of a judge, that wasn't conclusive proof, but for those who knew Mary's pain, that was more than enough. Patricia entered the room with a tense face. "The prosecutor of the anti-corruption unit will receive us today at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. He already saw the evidence, the video, Father Matt's statements, the will, and he agreed to review the case." "And the press?" Lucy asked. "They are waiting, but they don't want to speak until we have legal protection. They say there have already been attempts at pressure, even threats. This is going to get worse." Gabriel, sitting on the edge of the sofa, didn't say anything. He held the bracelet that Mary had left him in his hands. He couldn't look at it without shaking. Patricia sat next to him. "We bury her today," she said, "and I don't plan to do it in silence. Not again." Michael, standing by the window, slowly turned. "Are you sure you want to talk? At that level?" Patricia didn't hesitate. "Yes, and I want to do it at the place where everything ended, and where it will start again." Hours later, a small caravan left the house for San Miguel, California. Mary's body, transferred from the hospice to the municipal cemetery, was inside a white van, simple, without frills, without escorts, only accompanied by her children, finally reunited, and by Lucy, the young woman who had decided not to let her story be erased. The ceremony was intimate, barely 20 people, a local priest, some nuns from the hospice, Don Ernest, who had travelled alone to say goodbye, and 3 reporters who filmed discreetly from afar. Lucy was the first to speak. Mary was not just another victim. She was a mother who fought until her last breath not to be forgotten. Today, finally, her children are with her, and her truth no longer belongs to silence. Michael placed a flower on the coffin. Gabriel knelt down. He cried in silence, not for the death, but for the years he let die without looking for her. Patricia held a portrait of Mary, the same one they had restored from the burned photo. In it, the woman smiled shyly, her eyes squinted by the sun. "They taught me to ignore you," she said out loud. "Not to see you, to be ashamed of what you were. But now I know you were the best I had. I ask for your forgiveness, for all those who didn't know how to reach out to you." When the coffin was lowered into the earth, there was a silence that didn't hurt. It was the kind of silence that leaves space to breathe. But at the end, as everyone began to leave, one of the reporters approached Lucy with a worried face. "I just received something," he told her. "An anonymous email. It has an attached video. It says it was recorded a year ago, at the Tacuba hospital." Lucy took the cell phone and played it. The image showed Mary, sitting in a wheelchair, looking out a window. Voices were heard in the background. One of them, Galvez's. "There's no point in you insisting anymore, Mrs. Mary. Your children don't want to know anything. They are not looking for you. You are no one to them anymore." The camera trembled. Mary looked him straight in the eyes. She replied with a soft voice, "You can take everything from me, but not that. I was their mother, and that can't be erased." Lucy felt a lump in her throat. She stopped the video. "Who sent it?" "I don't know," the journalist said. "But it seems that Galvez is no longer so sure that he can hide forever." Lucy looked at the horizon. There were still things to be said, and Mary's story wasn't over yet. The afternoon began to fall over San Miguel, California. The sky, a dull grey, seemed to weigh on the shoulders of those who still remained in the municipal cemetery. Mary's body now rested beneath the earth, surrounded by wildflowers, without a mausoleum, without marble, but with something infinitely more valuable: the presence of her children, her granddaughter, her story finally told. Lucy remained standing to the side, watching with watery eyes Gabriel's silhouette in front of the grave. He hadn't moved since the gravediggers finished throwing the last shovelful of dirt. In his hands, he was still holding the bracelet, that antique, worn jewel that was once given by a mother with the hope of being remembered. Patricia slowly approached him. "Do you want us to leave you alone?" she asked. Gabriel shook his head, without taking his eyes off the ground. "I never felt so accompanied, or so guilty." Michael, a few feet away, remained silent. He didn't want to interrupt, not because he didn't feel the same, but because he understood that that reunion was not only about blood. It was about memory, about debt. Gabriel finally spoke. "The last time I saw her, I didn't dare to touch her. She was walking slowly, carrying a broken bag. She got on the bus and I lost her among the people. I was wearing a suit, a watch, a last name, and I wasn't able to say, 'Mom.'" His voice broke. "And when I found out she died, when I saw her face on the news, I knew there would be no way to tell her everything I kept silent." Lucy approached. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "There is a way, Gabriel, not with words, but with actions. You are here. That is also an act of love, even if it's late, even if it's incomplete." Gabriel fell to his knees in front of the tombstone. He placed the bracelet on the damp earth, and in silence, with his head bowed, he began to cry. Patricia knelt beside him. "You don't need to say anything," she whispered. "She already forgave you." She had it written in every line of her notebook. She never held a grudge. She only hoped that you would return. Lucy, watching the scene, felt something inside her break and rebuild at the same time. That story that had begun with a push on a bus was now ending at that moment, under that sky, with those three who were once broken and now held each other. It was then that footsteps were heard on the gravel. The three turned around. Attorney Torres approached with a somber expression. His face was distraught. In his hands, a sealed envelope. He didn't need words. His gesture was enough. Lucy approached first. "What happened?" Torres handed over the envelope. "Galvez. He showed up." Everyone held their breath. "He turned himself in this morning at the Coyocan precinct. He said he couldn't live with the weight anymore, that he had helped forge documents, that he had participated in the operation to separate Mary from her children, that he had covered up illegal adoptions for more than 20 years. He handed over names, accounts, and a letter." Gabriel took the envelope. Inside, a handwritten sheet. "I saw Mary for the last time in the hospital. She asked me only one thing, that if her children appeared, I should tell them that she had loved them until the last second. I didn't do it. I preferred to protect a last name, a signature, a lie. Today I am left only with that, the truth, and a forgiveness that I no longer expect to receive." Lucy looked at Torres. "Was he arrested?" "Yes, but there is no turning back now. The media already knows. And with what he handed over, they are going to open a national investigation. This got out of our hands, and that's the best thing that could have happened." Patricia put her hand to her heart. "Then, we are no longer alone." "No," Lucy said in a low voice. "Mary is no longer alone." Torres breathed deeply. His gaze was now one of relief. "Is there anything else?" he said. "Mary left a second will, one that should only be opened if her children recognized her." They all looked at each other. "And they recognized her," Michael said. Torres nodded. "Then prepare yourselves, because the true legacy is not what she left written, but what you are about to build." Lucy looked down at the notebook, and she knew that one last page was missing to be written. A month after the funeral, the boarding house in East LA, the one where Mary lived her last years in shadows, memories, and silences, was completely transformed. It was no longer a place of abandonment. Now it had a name, life, and purpose: Mary Della Pena Home. The carved wooden sign hung firmly over the main door. Inside, the previously cracked walls were painted clean white, the rooms rearranged, the beds lined with new sheets. But what changed the atmosphere the most was the sound: voices, laughter, elderly women telling stories that no one had asked them before. Elderly people who, for the first time in years, were called by their name and not by a number. Patricia walked through the central hallway, checking every corner with an attentive gaze. She didn't wear a suit or heels, but simple, comfortable clothes. On her wrist, she still wore Mary's bracelet, shining under the light of the patio. Beside her, Lucy held a folder with the last signatures of the volunteers. "Do you realize?" Lucy told her. "Just over 3 months ago, this was just a forgotten room with a notebook in a broken bag." "And now," Patricia replied, "it's a house full of memories that won't be erased." Michael from the kitchen took out sweet rolls for the visitors. He wasn't skillful, but he did it with such honest clumsiness that all the residents loved him like a grandson. Gabriel, for his part, didn't live there, but he went every day. He was in charge of bringing medicine, checking permits, making legal calls. He had resigned from the position he held in his father's company. He said it out loud. "I prefer to carry my mother's last name than to continue pretending that the other one belongs to me." The prosecutor had opened a formal investigation. Galvez had been prosecuted and sent to pre-trial detention. His testimony had dragged along 3 other lawyers involved in the network of illegal adoptions. Mary's story became a front-page story in the country's main media, but most importantly, her name was cleared in the Child Services Agency archives, and her identity, once lost, was now intact. Torres arrived at the boarding house with an envelope in his hand. "I brought you something," he announced. "Officially, the property is now registered in the name of the home. It is legal, irrevocable." Lucy smiled. "And the new will?" "Ratified, with a notarized copy." Mary left clear instructions. She didn't ask for an expensive tombstone or tributes. "Only this," he said, handing over a sheet. "A letter." Patricia opened it. She recognized the handwriting from the first stroke. It was Mary's. "If this letter is being read, it is because my story survived. Thank you, to whoever asked about me, to whoever didn't let me fall. I'm not looking for monuments, only memory. Let it be known that I existed, that I loved, that I lost, but that, in the end, they found me, and that was enough." The tears fell without drama, silent, real. There was no theatricality in the room, only a peace that embraced everyone like a warm blanket on a winter afternoon. Lucy approached a shelf where the restored portrait of Mary was. Beside it, they placed the original photo, the one that was burned, torn, forgotten. Now united, visible. The 3 images. Mary young with Gabriel and Thomas, Mary old in the hospital, Mary free, in the memories of those who finally knew her full name. Patricia caressed the frame molding. "This is what she taught me," she said, "that abandonment is not overcome with rage. It is overcome with memory." Lucy hugged her from behind. "And you are doing it. We are all doing it." Before going out to the patio, Patricia turned to the camera that Lucy had set up to document everything. She looked straight into the lens, without fear. "If you made it this far, if you listened to every part of this story, if you felt even a little bit of what we felt, then I ask you not to let this be erased. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the notification bell to receive the next stories that also deserve to be told. And if you can, support us with a super thanks. That small gesture helps us continue recovering memories like Mary's. And if you truly made it to the end, I want you to write a very special word in the comments: resistance. Because that's what she was. That's all of us who don't let the truth be buried with oblivion." The camera turned off. Outside, the wind blew softly, and among the trees in the patio, someone would swear they saw an elderly woman sitting in the shade, watching calmly, like someone who finally rested.